Chapter 104. In the dark and damp depths of the underground, the environment was so dark that one couldn't even see one's own fingers. It was filled with the smell of decay. The endless darkness was full of oppression, causing goosebumps to rise all over one's body. The most terrifying thing was that in the dark environment from time to time, cold purple eyes would flash, which was especially frightening. The dark surroundings were silent, but there was a faint reflection of a sharp edge that could cut everything. The sharp-eyed people could vaguely see the old man holding a black scythe. His skin was dry and the cold light was really reflected from his scythe. This old man was Uchiha Madara, and the man and woman in front of him were quite extraordinary. Just by looking at their appearance one could tell that they were a perfect match. Dustless, aren't you going to introduce them? Madara looked up at Dustless and Otsutsuki Haguro in front of him, nodded slightly and immediately raised the corner of his mouth into a smile. His sunken eyes rested on Haguro, and his old eyes flashed with deep confusion as he motioned to Dustless. He didn't know why, but Uchiha Madara felt that Otsutsuki Hagoromo was particularly strange, and Madara couldn't explain it clearly. This young girl gives me a strange feeling, but I always have a feeling of déjà vu. Looking at Haguro from the corner of his eyes, Madara's eyes were full of deep confusion. He had never seen the girl in front of him in his life because they were from the same era and there was a generation gap. Her name is Haguro and she will be my subordinate from now on. Dustless smiled faintly and his clear black eyes were full of calmness. Looking at Madara's old eyes, Dustless explained calmly. Madara naturally knew the surname Otsutsuki, and there couldn't be such a coincidence in the world. Dustless casually found a subordinate named Otsutsuki. Yes. Madara couldn't find any information about Haguro in his life's memory, so he had to nod, thinking that the feeling of déjà vu just now was a simple illusion. Ordinary people would be scared half to death if they saw him like this, but the girl in front of him was as calm as stagnant water. This was enough to prove how extraordinary she was. The Tensigen in Otsutsuki Hagoromo's eyes also turned into a pair of dull black eyes because of Dustless's reminder. Although it's not clear whether Madara knows about the Tensigen or not, it's better to be safe than sorry. Damned thief. At this moment, Otsutsuki's face was calm, but his heart was filled with anger. If it weren't for her and Dustless's agreement in advance, she would have definitely used the Golden Wheel reincarnation explosion to completely cut Madara in two. Without Uchiha Madara, the Geto Mazo would not have been lost, and the Otsutsuki branch family and the main family would not have run counter to each other, and the branch family would not have awakened the Tensigen and destroyed the main family because of differences in opinion. The source of the destruction of the Otsutsuki clan is naturally Uchiha Madara, who stole the Geto Mazo. But then again, frowning slightly, Dustless, who had already learned about the Third Shinobi World War, couldn't help but have doubts in his heart. The so-called plot history was twisted into pieces by him, the plot destroyer. Whether Uchiha Obito can still become Madara's subordinate as before, Dustless doesn't know, but it's not something he can worry about. For the scheming Uchiha Madara, it doesn't matter if there are no conditions. What matters is whether he has the determination to do it. Even if there are no conditions, he can create perfect conditions. This is what Dustless admires the most about this old guy. He has no choice. It seems that he misread Dustless's thoughts. Madara's dry mouth raised with a domineering smile. Although it looked strange and particularly scary, it was extremely strong. Glancing at Madara, Dustless ridiculed him. Although the Uchiha Madara he fought before was transformed by Ling, all aspects were almost the same. Even if Madara is really resurrected now, Dustless is confident that he can fight against him. Compared to Madara, who didn't know anything about him after 2 consecutive practice sessions, Wuxia already knew everything about him. As long as the little girl named Rin is killed by Kakashi and Uchiha Obito sees this scene, I think he will completely fall into darkness and step into hell. As if he was sure that Uchiha Obito will fall into endless darkness, Madara's eyes were extremely calm, and the light of wisdom seemed to pass through the layers of time and space to see the scene of Uchiha Obito surrendering to him. Madara's plan is indeed perfect. His series of plans made Obito despair of reality. Facing the loss of his true love, he chose to use genjutsu to hope to see Rin. This shows the extent of Obito's fall into darkness. However, there are always some unexpected things that happen. You should go with Zetsu. Frowning slightly, Madara still chose a two-handed insurance. As the saying goes, plans can't keep up with changes. There is no absolute plan, and any plan designed by people has loopholes that people don't pay attention to. He can see through this. The existence of Dustless and Obito is to help him perfect those loopholes. That's not a problem. Dustless didn't refuse. After all, he and Madara are now allies in the trenches. Rejecting Madara's proposal, Dustless doesn't expect Madara to fall out with him over this small issue. But at this stage there is no need to contradict Madara. Because the cooperation in front of him is a win-win situation. Even if Madara's strength has entered this realm, his role is negligible, even negligible, but the two sides have the same essential purpose. They can go together to plan behind the scenes and then conspire against the whole world. Moreover, staying with Madara will allow him to enter the water first, and once the Jubi is resurrected in the future, he will be the first to pick the fruit of victory. Chapter 105. 7 days later, in the lush green forest, several agile black shadows could be seen shuttling through the forest. Their agile movements were as skillful as primates, and their speed was extremely fast. Often, in the blink of an eye, they would appear in another place. That guy really deserves to die. The two figures were none other than Dustless and Otsutsuki Haruo. As for Zetsu, he obediently laid on the ground and moved in stealth. He tactfully pulled away from Dustless and Otsutsuki Haruo. These two super-dimensional monsters were not something he could touch. Although Dustless didn't mention anything about Otsutsuki Dustless's strength, anyone with half a brain can clearly imagine what kind of person Uchiha Dustless is. It is absolutely impossible for him to find a woman with mediocre strength to be his only subordinate. She must be at least on the same level as the Kage-level ninja of the various villages. Therefore he was able to see through this point. Dustless didn't even need to make a move. That subordinate of his could easily crush him. You mean Uchiha Madara? Apart from Dustless, only Uchiha Madara can make Otsutsuki gnash his teeth. As the culprit behind the destruction of the Otsutsuki clan, it's not hard to imagine how much hatred he has for her. Do I need you to tell me that? Staring at Dustless, Otsutsuki Hagoromo's pretty face was covered with frost. Although Otsutsuki was destroyed in the internal strife of the clan, Uchiha Madara was the one who directly caused the internal strife. How could she easily let him off? Don't be careless. That old man isn't as weak as you think. Seeing the murderous look on Otsutsuki's face, Dustless immediately frowned and warned. Although he defeated Uchiha Madara in the system's world, whether he can defeat this Uchiha Madara in front of him is ambiguous. After all, Madara is not alone. Although he is now completely dead, Dustless believes that he must have some unknown cards. I naturally know that he is extraordinary. He is the first person to open the Rinnegan the day after tomorrow. How can he be an ordinary person? Otsutsuki Haguro said softly. He didn't reject Dustless as much as before. The first person who opened Rinnegan was naturally the legendary goddess Otsutsuki Kagaya, and the second person was Otsutsuki Hagoromo, who was born with Rinnegan. Until now, thousands of years later, Uchiha Madara was the first to open the Rinnegan, which explained everything. But that guy is really crazy. The 10-tailed beast has the power to destroy heaven and earth. Isn't he worried that his strength isn't enough to suppress the 10-tailed beast? Thinking of the ghetto mazo he just saw in the depths of the ground, Otsutsuki Haguro took a deep breath and couldn't help but sweat for Madara's madness and so-called plan. At the same time, Otsutsuki Haguro was also surprised by Madara's wisdom and the shrewdness of all sides. Madara was able to calculate all the unfavorable factors half a century ago, and then remove the dregs in the plan one by one. This kind of terrifying IQ, everyone has to bow down to him. However, if Dustless knew Otsutsuki Haguro's thoughts, he would not hesitate to despise him loudly. Compared with Black Zetsu, who has played with the world for thousands of years, Uchiha Madara is just a grain of sand not worth mentioning. Uchiha Madara is indeed a difficult enemy to deal with. For Uchiha Madara, Dustless also has a respectful attitude. After all, this guy's ability and strength are obvious to all. If it weren't for the existence of the system, I'm afraid that Dustless can't catch up with him even if he worked hard for 100 years. Perhaps there is no need to chase Uchiha Madara. As long as Dustless is willing to sink, Uchiha Madara will be killed by Uchiha Itachi in the future. Don't talk about him, you are also not a good thing. Otsutsuki Haguro suddenly turned to Dustless and scolded. Although the eyes of Otsutsuki Haguro in front of him have been replaced with normal human eyes, her temperament has not changed. She is still so beautiful, giving people the feeling of an ice goddess. Hearing this, Dustless was speechless. Didn't you attack Uchiha Madara with your mouth? How come it changed to me? I didn't say that I am a gentleman. Dustless smiled indifferently. For these good and bad things it doesn't matter. If being a good person can make his strength continue to grow, then he definitely doesn't mind changing his face. If it doesn't work, then it's the opposite. Absolute. Looking through the dense forest, Dustless's eyes suddenly became awe-inspiring, and the environment in front of him was clear. Dustless Sama. Hearing Dustless calling his name, White Zetsu dared to approach Dustless. He was created by Uchiha Madara, but facing a strong person like Dustless, he still felt fear from the depths of his soul. This has nothing to do with Madara's creation. Is the little girl named No-Era Rin really taken away by the mist? Frowning slightly, Dustless asked indifferently. He didn't expect that the previous lesson he taught the mist not only didn't make them afraid, but also made them work even harder. The Kanushi Bridge is a confrontation between Konoha and the Rock. Now that the mist people are intervening, it shows that they still hold a grudge against Dustless and the Sannin. It's really troublesome. Let me help them. A strange smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Naturally, he sentenced No-Era Rin to death in his heart. As for the so-called guilt, Wuxia has never felt it. The world of shinobi is so cruel. Unknowingly, you will become a pawn of others. If you don't keep up with the times, you can only go with the flow. Even if you want to be a pawn, you will be directly obliterated. Dustless naturally understood why the mist took No-Era Rin. They want to seal the Sanbai in her body and then return to Konoha to destroy Konoha's ninja village. Idiot, this is exactly what I want. Dustless's eyes were cold and he sneered again and again. The mist's approach was exactly what he wanted. Chapter 106. The Mist Village was isolated on the island and all kinds of resources were extremely scarce. Compared to Konoha, the richest country on the mainland, it was impossible for them not to be jealous of Konoha. Especially after the last sneak attack on Konoha's Sannin, and Dustless failed, but after losing a few rice, their hatred for Konoha's ninja village went up a level. Now that the war between the Rock and Konoha was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, how could the mist let it go? In the dark and bottomless cave, the environment was so dark that one could not even see one's own fingers. The surrounding yellowish rock walls were filled with traces of the passage of time. The ground was full of loose particles and the thick congealed soil was piled up everywhere. Obviously no one had been here for a long time. However, now the dirty lights were reflected on the walls, and in the endless dark cave, there was a gloomy laughter from time to time. Through the reflection on the rock wall he could clearly see a few strong and ferocious men. Judging from their attire, they should be the ninjas of the Mist Village. Serves you right, idiot kid, who told you to be a ninja from Konoha? The arrogant laughter sounded and the tone was arrogant. Several mist ninjas looked at the little girl with disdain. Their faces were full of contempt and hatred. Maybe if it wasn't for some special reason, they would have already cut the little girl into pieces. There was even a mist ninja who stepped on the girl's head ruthlessly, twisting his foot back and forth. His sharp eyes were emotionless and his cold eyes were filled with endless disgust. Shut up, you bunch of trash. If this little girl is going to die, I'll skin you brats alive. Her life is much more precious than you bunch of trash. A powerful roar sounded from the deepest part of the cave, and the flowing air was shaken, forming a large vacuum area. The tone was full of arrogance and contempt. Looking in the direction of the voice, one could vaguely make out a huge fat man with a huge saber full of fangs on his back. The saber looked like the fangs of a shark. It was one of the 7 legendary swordsmen, Fugumaki. A bunch of trash who bully the weak and fear the strong. Seeing the mist shinobi stopped and looked at him with fear, Watermelon Mountain Pufferfish curled his lips and said with disdain, "Senpai Jinchuriki. When we return to Konoha there will be a good show to watch." Gazing at the unconscious girl on the ground and sensing the power of the tailed beast within her, the Watermelon Mountain River Boar Ghost's chubby face couldn't help but curl into a mocking and ruthless smile. The girl's face was quite beautiful without any blemishes. She was wearing a Konoha headband on her head, but there were still traces of tears on both sides of her eyes. The last time he was crushed by the Sannin, he was still holding a grudge, and he couldn't wait for the Mist to launch a fierce attack on Konoha. The Mist's plan was quite simple and thorough. They just used Rin's identity as a Konoha ninja. They intended to use her identity to enter Konoha and open the seal to make the Sanbai attack Konoha. This time Konoha must, boom, boom. Watermelon Mountain River Boar Ghost's words stopped abruptly, and the cave suddenly trembled and countless rocks began to fall off on a large scale. There was a trend of collapse. Damn it, what's going on? Is it possible that Konoha's ninjas are attacking us? Feeling the unprecedented violent tremors, Watermelon Mountain River Boar Ghost's chubby face turned black, and his eyes were uncertain. When he was about to go out to investigate, the tremors in the cave became more violent. Kakaka. The golden light was like a peerless divine sword, cutting through all obstacles and completely piercing through the cave. A ray of dazzling sunlight shone into the interior of the cave, and the cave that had not seen the sun for many years began to show some signs of life. This is... Watermelon Mountain River Boar Ghost looked at the golden light that penetrated the interior of the cave, and for a moment he couldn't react and his eyes were filled with disbelief. It was precisely because he felt that this cave was difficult to destroy, as it was as strong as a mountain, and difficult to break through, that he chose this place as his base. But now someone actually broke it with a casual blow, and how could he not be angry? Especially the golden light that appeared for a moment. It gave him a feeling of déjà vu, as if he had fought with it in the past. He suddenly looked up and saw two black shadows rushing down. Who are you two? The Watermelon Mountain River Boar Ghost's expression darkened as he looked at the two figures that had appeared like ghosts. To be able to easily break through such a sturdy cave, their strength was naturally that of someone beyond the dimension. These two ghostly figures were naturally Dustless and Otsutsuki Dustless. The only difference was that Dustless was wearing a special spiral mask, which was almost identical to Uchiha Obito's mask. I advise you not to meddle in other people's business. We are ninjas of the Mist Village. The Watermelon Mountain River Boar Ghost sensed that something was wrong when he saw the cold aura coming from the two of them. Just from the aura alone, he knew that the strength of these two people was definitely the kind that could only be looked up to and could not be touched. At the moment he could only use the name of the mist to scare them and hope that they would leave. However, Watermelon Mountain River Boar Ghost was obviously whimsical. I didn't hear what you said. Wuxia, who was wearing a mask, looked at the cautious Watermelon Mountain and River Dolphin Ghost with a smile. He deliberately picked his ears, indicating that he didn't hear anything. He looked at Dolphin Ghost with a playful look. Then a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. His whole body was covered with flowing light. Then he disappeared and rushed out. Do you know what the speed of light is, and the feeling of being kicked by the speed of light, do you know? A lazy voice suddenly appeared behind Watermelon Mountain River Boar Ghost, and the tone was particularly lazy. Chapter 107. Have you ever been kicked at the speed of light? The Watermelon Mountain pufferfish was slightly startled by the lazy and strange voice behind it. Just as it was about to leave, the golden light behind it suddenly expanded, and it could vaguely see a powerful golden calf rumbling towards it. Speed of light kick. The long leg shined with golden light as it hit the back of the Watermelon Mountain pufferfish without any mercy. Boom! The Watermelon Mountain River Boar Ghost coughed up blood, and he felt as if his back had been kicked by a prehistoric beast. The bones in his back collapsed and his blood boiled. His organs were dislocated and his life force was quickly draining away. The Watermelon Mountain pufferfish flew out like a cannonball. Boom! 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 The black shadow smashed open the entrance of the cave, leaving behind a huge hole. The sealed cave immediately had free air vents, and a cool breeze blew in from the hole in front. The dry depths of the cave finally became much cooler. Looking closer, the black shadow was the Watermelon Mountain pufferfish that had turned into a pile of flesh and blood. It's really fragile. Staring at the flesh and blood of the Watermelon Mountain pufferfish, Dustless shook his head helplessly. He immediately took off the spiral mask and revealed his handsome face. His dark eyes were still like stagnant water, and there was no emotional fluctuation that a human should have. Dustless glanced at the body of the watermelon mountain pufferfish and turned away without any change in his expression. The so-called 7 legendary swordsmen of the ninja sword were not even an appetizer for him. Motherf *Ker, how dare you sneak attack us? Run, idiot, didn't you see that the watermelon mountain pufferfish of the 7 legendary swordsmen of the ninja sword was kicked into pieces by him? Seeing that the watermelon mountain pufferfish was brutally kicked by Dustless, the rest of the ninjas couldn't help but feel a chill down their spine. They looked at Dustless, who was walking towards them with a smile on his face, and chose to run away. Go to hell. Lifting his hand slightly, Otsutsuki Hagoromo's eyes flashed with a cold light. He waved his hand and released a powerful repulsive force. Several mist ninjas who were trying to escape were instantly smashed to the rock wall. The tyrannical force turned all of them into meat paste. This little girl is really savage. Seeing this, Dustless couldn't help but feel a chill run down his spine. If he had chosen to submit to Otsutsuki Imuro on the moon, his end might have been even more miserable than this. Is the power in this little girl's body the three-tailed beast? Otsutsuki Haguro walked over gracefully, her eyes turned into the Tensigen, and carefully stared at the unconscious Noera Rin for a long time before she spoke. The surprise in her eyes disappeared in a flash, and once again returned to the black eyes of the ancient well. The power of a tailed beast is just SOSO. Hearing this, Wuxia just rolled his eyes, but he didn't refute it. For Otsutsuki Hagoromo, who has the Tensigen, the only person who can threaten her is the legendary Jubi. Don't you want to collect tailed beasts to resurrect the Jubi? This little girl has the Jubi, why don't you? Otsutsuki Hagoromo looked at Dustless, her clear eyes bloomed with a cold light, and her thin lips slightly opened as she softly suggested. After many days of observation, Otsutsuki Hagoromo has been completely disappointed with the world created by the Sage of the Six Paths. Only, as Dustless said, only by completely reassembling the chakra and taking the chakra of all the people in the world can the world restore temporary peace. Don't worry about it. It's not that Dustless didn't want to take the tailed beasts, but anyone whose Jinchuriki was taken would die. Of course, the Jubi was an exception, because the Ghetto Mazo left abundant vitality in his body. Even if his tailed beast was taken, he wouldn't be able to move for a few months at most. But Noera Rin was different. After her tailed beast was taken, she would die without a doubt. Dustless was counting on her to pull Obito into the group, not to send her to hell now. Do you have a detailed plan? Otsutsuki Hagoromo stared at Dustless with expectation, and after covering her slightly messy silver hair to her ears, her eyes flashed with a burning luster. Although Dustless promised to marry Otsutsuki Hagoromo, no woman wants her future husband to be an idiot, not only in terms of force but also in terms of intelligence. Plan? Bullshit plan. Absolute power crushes all plans. Throwing a supercilious look at Otsutsuki Yuluo, Wuxia shrugged his shoulders and smiled unscrupulously. His face was full of indifference, as if he had nothing to lose. You. Otsutsuki Hagoromo's mouth twitched fiercely, and his chest rose and fell, making Dustless's mouth dry, and his eyes swayed up and down with the rhythm of Otsutsuki Hagoromo's chest. Glaring at Dustless, Otsutsuki Hagoromo suddenly felt that his innocent face was extremely annoying, and couldn't wait to punch him into 8 pieces. Otsutsuki patted his beautiful forehead with a headache. Although Otsutsuki agreed with Dustless's statement, he didn't have a detailed step-by-step plan. Maybe the one who will resurrect the Jubi in the end will be Madara. In that case, glancing coldly at Noera Rin, Otsutsuki Hagoromo's eyes flashed with wisdom and said in a deep voice, "This kid seems to know that she has become the Sanbai's Jinchuriki. In that case, we will let nature take its course. We only need to secretly implant a special charm in her body so that she can't hurt herself." Speaking of this, Otsutsuki Hagoromo's handsome face swept with hostility and said coldly, "I will use the Tensigen or your Mangekyo to control her mind, and let this little girl named Noera Rin slaughter the ninjas of Konoha." Hearing this, Dustless looked at Otsutsuki Hagoromo with a cold expression, and took a deep breath. This plan is vicious. Noera Rin is an extremely kind ninja, and she loves the ninjas of the same village very much. Knowing that she will inevitably have thoughts of suicide after she slaughters Konoha's ninjas. As long as she dies in the hands of Kakashi. This woman. Fortunately, she is one of us. Dustless said in his heart. Fortunately, he promised to marry her. Otherwise, this crazy woman may join forces with Uchiha Madara to kill him. Chapter 108. Otsutsuki Haruo frowned slightly. Seeing Dustless looking at her like a monster, she raised her nose and stared at Dustless with dissatisfaction. Her clear eyes flashed with a hint of slyness. "I might as well tell you if you had refused me." Her eyes circled around Dustless, her slender fingers pointed to her chin. The banter on Otsutsuki Haruo's pretty face became more intense. Her beautiful face had a charming little dimple, and her whole body was full of unprecedented coquettishness, like a deadly poison, like a peerless enchantress, full of unprecedented attractiveness. Turning his head with an extremely unnatural expression, Dustless hurriedly avoided Otsutsuki Haruo's clear and spotless eyes, fearing that his heart would be seen through by those eyes that seemed to be able to see through everything. What will happen?" There was a rare tremor in his voice. Dustless also wanted to know if he refused Otsutsuki Haruo's unreasonable request, would this woman go crazy and chase him to the ends of the earth? "Of course I will chase you to the earth and cut you into pieces." Blinking her eyes, looking at Dustless who didn't dare to look at her, Otsutsuki Haruo said very seriously. Her breathing was steady, her heartbeat was also extremely normal, and her face was as usual without the slightest hint of joking. "Then I am still alive now, shouldn't I thank you for not killing me?" The corner of his eyes twitched vigorously. Dustless rolled his eyes speechlessly, deliberately dragging his voice. Looking at the complacent Otsutsuki Haruo, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Otsutsuki Haruo nodded very seriously, apparently what Dustless meant. "Are we just going to leave this brat here?" Looking at Rin who continued to sleep, Dustless frowned and asked Otsutsuki Haruo. "Uchiha Obito is not easy to deal with. We must not let him see any flaws, otherwise we can only lift a stone and smash our own feet." Dustless naturally understood Uchiha Obito's madness. The reason why Uchiha Madara spent so much time and effort to make him completely fall was also to set off Obito's extraordinary ability. "No, don't worry, after all, Uchiha Obito is still a kid. As for this little girl." Otsutsuki Haruo signaled Dustless that there was no need to care about Uchiha Obito's problem, then looked at Rin and whispered, "Send her back to Konoha's base and then control her mind with Tennogen." As for Uchiha Obito's matter, Dustless didn't need to worry about it. Uchiha Madara gave this task to White Zetsu. Maybe Obito was rescued by White Zetsu and he was facing Madara's attack. Send her back to Konoha's base. After saying that, Dustless put on the spiral mask again. After all, the world already knew that he was completely dead, and he was very good at controlling the world behind the scenes. Konoha's ninja base. Konoha's ninjas were really the most resilient existence. Although they were fighting with the Rock's ninjas all day and night, they didn't feel the lack of physical strength and they were still fighting with high morale. Konoha's brainwashing was very successful. Compared to the tired Rock's ninjas, they were much more confident. "It's been a long time, Konoha." Looking at the bonfire in the distance, Konoha's ninjas were obviously preparing dinner, Dustless said with emotion. Once upon a time he was loyal to Konoha's vanguard, the captain of the fire brigade. Wherever there was a fire he was the vanguard. The girl Dustless was holding in his right arm was naturally Rin Noera. His figure swept into Konoha's ninja village like a ghost. His movements were extremely skillful. Although Konoha's ninja village had a lot of defense barriers around it, they didn't have any effect on him. His body was transparent and he ignored the barriers and he easily invaded. "Goodbye. Tragic child crushed by the gears of time." Glancing at Rin who was sleeping peacefully, Dustless was about to turn around and leave, but suddenly a dazzling golden light flashed beside him, and immediately a man with blonde hair and dark blue eyes appeared in front of him, holding a high-speed rotating chakra energy ball in his hand. It was Namikaze Minato who had the title Yellow Flash. Boom! Dustless under the Rasengan mask smiled indifferently, and immediately jumped horizontally, easily avoiding the attack of the Rasengan. The Rasengan hit the ground and blasted a deep hole in the ground. "It's a pity you are fast, but I am faster than you." Floating in the air indifferently, Dustless said. Now for him who controlled the Tensigan, floating in the air was just a trivial matter. "You can float." Seeing Dustless floating in the air, Namikaze Minato's dark blue eyes were filled with surprise. It may be a trivial matter for Dustless, but looking at the whole world, There are only a few people who can float in the air without external help, definitely not more than 5. But you are still wrong. His pupils suddenly flashed with cold light, and in an instant Namake's Minato appeared behind Dustless floating in the air, and the Rasengan in his hand was much bigger than before. I'm still faster than you. After that, the Rasengan in Namake's Minato's hand roared and smashed toward Dustless's back. So that's how it is. You are indeed the man who will be the 4th Hokage in the future. Slightly turning his head, looking at the ninjutsu mark on his shoulder, Dustless frowned slightly, and immediately remembered the Flying Thunder God Jutsu, and then his eyebrows relaxed and his face showed a clear color. The Flying Thunder God Jutsu left on me in advance when he attacked me, really smart and cunning. But what can I do? Dustless said to himself without looking back, and his face was indifferent, letting the rapidly rotating Rasengan close to him. Chapter 109. His dark blue eyes stared at Wu Chen's back and he didn't move at all. Seeing that Wu Chen didn't dodge and let the Rasengan touch his body, Minato's eyebrows unconsciously raised, and his brows wrinkled, forming a clear Chuan character. Is it possible that he can ignore my ninjutsu or, holding his kunai to defend against Dustless? Minato stared at Dustless and at the same time his eyes locked on Dustless's Rasengan, and his breathing became unusually heavy. This is... Seeing the Rasengan close to Dustless's back, Minato's pupils instantly widened, and his face was full of disbelief. He thought that Dustless's physical fitness was strong enough to be used as steel, but he would still be injured, but in fact it was not the case. The Rasengan was like a grain of sand sinking into the sea without the slightest ripple. The moment it entered Dustless's body, it was instantly absorbed by a special force. Dustless's body was like a black hole in the depths of the universe, with endless devouring power. Is it a space ninjutsu that transferred the Rasengan? Looking at the masked man Dustless with uncertain eyes, Minato's heart fell to the bottom. In fact, he hoped that this was a space ninjutsu similar to Flying Thunder God, but he always had a feeling that it wasn't. It meant that this was a ninjutsu that he had never seen before, and it was likely to be stranger than space ninjutsu. Often the unknown is more dangerous. Don't show such a surprised expression, that was just a trick to fool children. Seeing Namake's Minato on guard, Dustless smiled faintly, and his tone was indeed insignificant. In fact, Dustless just used the ability of Tensigen to absorb chakra. But even so, for Namake's Minato, who had never seen such a strange situation before, it was indeed worthy of him being extremely cautious. The gap between you and me is too big. In fact, for the future, erasing you is just a matter of a moment. Staring at Minato's face, Dustless under the spiral mask said very calmly. Minato's biggest advantage was the absolute speed shown by the Flying Thunder God, but it didn't pose any threat to Dustless and the effect was minimal. If you can come at me. Namake's Minato turned a deaf ear to Wu Chen's sarcasm. His aura was calm and his heart was as calm as an ancient well, as if it was made of iron. He was not moved at all but simply frowned. You'll know what it means to not kill you. The corner of his mouth raised a strange smile. Even with the mask covering his face, Minato could hear the sound of his mouth grinding, which made him feel uncomfortable, especially uncomfortable, and had a creepy feeling. After all, you're not in the set of the script. Casually glancing at Minato, Dustless's eyes suddenly fell on Rin, who was lying motionless on the ground. His dark pupils twisted sharply and his right eye turned into a blue Tensigen. Under Minato's surprised gaze, Dustless's Tensigen in his right eye flashed with a strong fluctuation of dojutsu. What kind of eye is that? Gives me a horrible feeling. Naturally, Namake's Minato saw spotless Tensigen, especially the berserk eye power that could forcibly distort time and space, which made him feel a palpitation and fear from the depths of his soul. Perhaps, as Dustless said before, maybe killing Minato was just a matter of thought. Ouch! At the same time, Rin, who was lying on the ground sleeping, suddenly opened her eyes. Her eyes were scarlet, and a strong chakra disaster appeared on her body. Her skin was covered with a bijou coat, and her eyes were filled with endless killing intent. A roar similar to a beast came out of Rin's mouth. Go! Her pupils suddenly widened, and the Tensigen once again flashed with a strong fluctuation of dojutsu. Rin's chakra erupted again and she went straight to the front where Konoha's ninjas were preparing to attack. A ruthless slaughter was about to begin. Although it's the opposite of the original design concept of the script, at least it's not in vain. Letting out a sigh of relief, Wu Chen's anxious heart was put down. Although the person was wrong, it was not a big deal. Originally, Rin was willing to die under Kakashi's chakra, but the current situation was different. The difference was not small, but in short, as long as Obito completely fell, nothing else mattered. That's the chakra of the bijou. Looking at Rin rushing towards Konoha's ninjas with a pale face, even if Minato's state of mind was good at this moment, he was still angry, and his anger continued to burn his reason. You actually sealed the sanbai in Rin's body. What is your so-called script? She's just an ordinary ninja, she shouldn't be worthy of being used by someone like you. Looking at Dustless, Minato's eyes were filled with killing intent, and at the same time he couldn't help but worry about Rin's future. Even if he can subdue her, will she still be accepted after killing Konoha's ninjas? Obviously not. There's no need to worry about her future. Seeing through Minato's naive attitude, Dustless's eyes were cold and he said coldly, Rin will die, and the person who will kill her with your own hands will be your teacher, Minato. After saying that, Dustless sneered. Originally, according to the script, the person who should kill Rin should be Kakashi. However, perhaps because of the appearance of Dustless, many of Kakashi's scripts were snatched away by Dustless. Of course, although Kakashi was successfully promoted to Jonin, according to the current situation, Kakashi, the white-haired kid, was not in Konoha's base. Therefore, the task of killing Rin could only be done by Minato and Beitai. Chapter 110. In the dark depths of the underground, Madara was no longer the same as before. The color in his pupils had obviously dimmed, and he had lost his luster. All the cells in his body were completely necrotic and he was powerless. It was as if as long as the wind gently brushed his body, he would completely pass away. Despite having the Geto Mazo to prolong his life, Uchiha Madara has been struggling at death's door for decades. Now it can be said that he is completely exhausted. He has reached his limit and there is no hope for him to continue. Madara-sama, that kid seems to have woken up. White Zetsu respectfully looked at Uchiha Madara, who was bowing his head in contemplation. Even though Madara was already in his twilight years and could die at any time, White Zetsu didn't dare to make a sound, and his tone was always respectful. Anyone who underestimates Uchiha Madara will step into a place of no return. That kid's vitality is quite strong. He didn't die even after being smashed like that. He's really lucky. Madara looked at the boy lying on the stone bed and his old eyes flashed with deep surprise. Half of his body was smashed, but he was still able to hold on until White Zetsu came to save him. This extremely strong vitality surprised him. But it's because of such a strong and extraordinary talent that he's valuable to me. Madara walked over with heavy steps and laughed in his heart. Obito was undoubtedly very suitable to carry out his Eye of the Moon plan, and now it's up to him to fool him. At this moment, Obito's whole body was wrapped in bandages, and his face was pale as if he had just recovered from a serious illness. His pupils were slightly opened and it seemed that he hadn't adapted yet. He glanced back and forth at the surrounding environment, and his face was filled with endless hesitation. Uchiha clan's undead. An old and weak voice rang out. Although he tried his best to maintain his imposing manner, anyone could hear that he was lacking in power. It hurts. Obito raised his head and looked at the old man walking towards him with a black scythe in his hand. Obito's pupils shrank as he was filled with fear. Just as he was about to scream, his bandaged body started to crack again, and a lot of blood oozed out of it. He was in so much pain that he didn't want to live anymore. Even so, he endured the piercing pain all over his body and looked at the old man in horror. I am Uchiha Madara. When he arrived in front of Obito, Madara's eyes turned sharply, and his murky old eye sockets emitted a power that was countless times stronger than Obito's. Madara's aura became even more powerful and his old face, which had been dead for many years, showed some color. Are you a human or a ghost? Is this the underworld? When Obito saw Madara's face, he was so scared that he stood up and looked at Madara with fear. Especially when he saw the sharp black scythe in his hand, his heart was in his throat and he couldn't help but gulp. You didn't die, you were miraculously saved by my subordinates, and this is not the underworld. Of course, it's not wrong to think that this is the underworld. After looking at Obito carefully for a moment, Madara slowly said, and his eyes flashed with disappointment. This chess piece, whether in strength or wisdom, was worse than Dustless. When Dustless saw Obito, he was very surprised and couldn't believe it. Compared to Obito, who looked like he had seen a ghost, Dustless was much stronger. Boy, do you see the cruelty of this world? After a helpless sigh, Madara abandoned his dissatisfaction with Obito, and his eyes flashed with a bright light, which made Obito scared. Cruelty? It seemed that Obito was scared by Madara's appearance, and his eyes were empty and gray. He temporarily lost the ability to think and could only follow Madara's will. What does this mean? Looking at Madara, Obito didn't know if it was subconscious or mechanical. It doesn't matter if you don't understand. Hearing this, Madara nodded faintly and immediately said, because you are weak, you are trampled by the enemy. Because you are weak, you can't protect your friends. Because you are weak, you can't protect your loved ones. Because you are weak, you can only be indifferent to the destruction of your loved ones. Old man, what do you mean? Hearing this, Obito looked at Madara, who was talking nonsense. If Madara didn't say that he was the one who saved him, Obito would have kicked him out. The little girl named Rin Noera is in trouble. Madara looked up at White Zetsu, indicating that he should say it. Rin, what did you say? Hearing White Zetsu say that Rin was in trouble, Obito jumped up like a cat whose tail was stepped on. He ignored his injuries and looked at White Zetsu coldly. The Mist Ninja sealed the Sanbai in her body, and now she's causing trouble in Konoha's camp. Looking at Obito's eyes, White Zetsu felt uncomfortable and said, Rin seems to have been completely controlled by the Bijou, and now she's become a killing machine. Boom. Perhaps because half of his body was made up of Hashirama's cells, Obito felt much stronger than before, and the amount of chakra in his body increased a lot. He directly shattered the stone bed he was lying on, and endless killing intent floated in his eyes. His body rushed out like a cannonball. Madara-sama, if we ignore that kid. Seeing Obito leave, White Zetsu frowned and looked quite distressed. It doesn't matter, you go and inform Dustless that Obito is here, and it's time to start the show, and welcome Obito's first and only audience. Chapter 111. Konoha's Ninja Village Station. A girl wearing a crimson bijou coat was as fast as lightning, shuttling between Konoha's ninjas. Every time she raised her sword, she would take away a large number of Konoha's ninjas. She was like a killing machine, mercilessly slaughtering Konoha's ninjas. Slowly savor the remaining time. With a cunning smile on his face, Dustless's voice sounded like a ghost, but his body became more and more ethereal, and his whole body completely lost its texture. Don't even think about escaping. Seeing Dustless's figure showing signs of dissipating, Minato's eyes immediately swept over, and his body appeared behind Dustless in the next second. I said, the gap is too big. The reason why I didn't kill you is because you're the best actor in this show. Slightly turning back, revealing half of his mask, the Tensigen surged with endless cold light. Dustless's clothes suddenly fluttered, and with himself as the center, the incomparably tyrannical repulsive force spread directly in all directions. The repulsive force erupted, forming a hollow area. Boom. Minato was suddenly hit by the repulsive force. The invisible repulsive force couldn't be touched at all, and he couldn't defend against it. His body was instantly bounced out, fragile and powerless like a broken kite, flying upside down and slamming into the rock wall. Sure enough, it's a very troublesome thing, but it doesn't have any effect on me. Looking at the space coordinates of the flying thunder god on his shoulder, Dustless's mouth raised with contempt, and immediately the chakra erupted, and the unique mark of the flying thunder god disappeared. Dustless's body then disappeared, and on Konoha's station, only Rin was left, completely under the control of the Bijou or Dustless's Tensigen. Her thin figure was like a machine, killing Konoha's ninjas without any emotion. Compared with the usual gentle and pure Rin, she was like a demon from hell at this moment. The strength of the Sanbai is at the bottom of the Bijou list. Compared to the Kyubi or the Hachibi, it's naturally a world of difference. But for Konoha's ninjas, it's an unprecedented terror. Can easily crush them like ants. Especially the Bijudama that flew out from time to time, it was even more irresistible, It destroyed the sky and destroyed the earth. Even the mountains that came in contact with it easily collapsed. It made Konoha's ninjas completely desperate. The situation was completely one-sided. Lin, stop. They are all your former companions. Minato looked bitterly at Rin, who was killing Konoha's ninjas. Minato's dark blue eyes were scarlet, and his hatred for Dustless was even more intense. He had never hated a person so much. He hated him so thoroughly and he couldn't wait to tear him to pieces. Hearing Minato's heartache, it seemed to awaken her inner reason. Rin's fierce offensive suddenly stopped, and her eyes that were full of havoc also recovered a little bit of clarity. She looked at Minato with a pale face. Although Rin couldn't speak, Minato could hear her cry for help. It was a sense of powerlessness that originated from the depths of her soul. This is really an unpleasant scene. Seeing Rin's little universe erupting just now and resisting his control, Wuxia, who was secretly observing from a distance, was taken aback. Immediately, the corner of his mouth turned cold, and a more powerful eye power surged out from the Tensigen in his right eye. Rin, who was struggling to resist Dustless's control, once again fought Konoha's ninjas. Like the autumn wind sweeping the fallen leaves, raging Konoha's ninjas. Damn the masked man. Seeing this, Minato's heart became more gloomy. He took a deep breath and a flash of determination flashed through his eyes. It seems that between Rin and Konoha's ninjas he must make a choice. Dustless Sama. At Dustless's feet, White Zetsu poked his head out from the ground and looked at Rin, who was strangling Konoha's ninjas, and said, "Uchiha Obito is coming." Hearing this, Dustless nodded slightly and immediately a cold light flashed in his eyes and said indifferently, "That's for the best, almost all the actors are here, it seems that the big show can start." White Zetsu also nodded. Whoosh. The golden light suddenly exploded, turning into a straight ray of light that swept towards Rin. Looking up, she saw Minato holding a kunai in front of Rin, with a cold expression on his face. It's nice to see a master and disciple killing each other. Seeing this, Dustless smiled faintly. His calm eyes continued to manipulate Noara Rin and Namake's Minato to fight. Noara Rin's strength was naturally not as good as Namake's Minato. Even if she transformed into a tailed beast, she was not as strong as Namake's Minato. However, due to the control of Dustless, he was evenly matched with Namake's Minato, and he even had a slight advantage. Rasengan. Seeing Rin rushing towards him again, Minato's eyes narrowed and his chakra surged, and in his hand was a high-speed rotating chakra energy ball, which was his specialty, Rasengan. Good chance. In the distance, Dustless saw Minato's murderous intent, and his mouth suddenly raised a smirk, and the Tensigen suddenly turned into a normal human's eyes, and he took back his power, and at the same time suppressed the Sanbai's power in Rin's body. Pucci. Losing Dustless's power and the Sanbai's power, Rin immediately turned back to the original fragile little girl, and her flexible abdomen was instantly torn into pieces by the high-speed rotating Rasengan, and became a bloody mess. Looking at Rin's abdomen, Namake's Minato's pupils instantly widened and he was shocked. He didn't expect Rin to be pierced by him. Instead, his Rasengan was sent flying just like before. Sensei, Rin, who recovered, looked at the arm inserted in her chest in horror. She expected to die, but the one who didn't kill her was her most respected sensei. And this scene was seen by Uchiha Obito. Chapter 112. The emotions of the Uchiha clan have always been emotional. The Sharingan is also known as the soul portrayal eye. The Uchiha clan has always had great love, and once they lose their love, a special chakra will emerge from the brain, reflecting the visual nerves and causing changes to the eyes. This process is known as eye-opening. Seeing the love of his life die at the hands of Minato, Uchiha Obito's pupils suddenly turned sharply, surpassing the world's understanding of the Sharingan. The two Tomo Sharingan in his eyes suddenly turned into the legendary Mangekyo Sharingan. Namake's Minato. Obito's face suddenly became distorted, terrifying like a ghost. Seeing Rin's abdomen being twisted into pieces by Minato, hatred continued to attack the remaining reason in his mind. A burning murderous intent that he had never felt before appeared in his mind, and a cold murderous intent floated out of his body, causing the surrounding temperature to drop to the freezing point. Boom. Just when Obito couldn't suppress his anger and was about to kill Minato, a figure jumped out of the void and kicked Obito away. It's amazing. He actually broke the rules of the Uchiha clan's eye opening. With only 2 tomo, he can directly open the Mangekyo Sharingan. After kicking Obito away, Dustless looked at Obito's Mangekyo Sharingan in surprise. The way he looked at Obito also changed. If Obito was at the bottom of the list, then there is no such thing as a genius in the world. Recalling the history of Uchiha Obito's Sharingan, Dust felt that he was weak. When he opened his Sharingan, it was the Sharingan with 2 tomo, and it was the same with the Mangekyo. The so-called common sense was trampled on and worthless in front of Uchiha Obito. Who the hell are you? Looking at Dustless, who was also wearing a mask, Obito, who was kicked away by Dustless, shouted hysterically at Dustless, his eyes full of beast-like madness. I advise you to save it. Rin has already been killed by Minato. This is an undeniable fact. Dustless's voice didn't completely fall, and Obito appeared in front of him with a sharp kunai aimed at Dustless's neck. Looked like he wanted to completely split Dustless in 2. You may be my opponent in the future, but right now you're still too young. Even with your Mangekyo Sharingan, you're still so weak, as small as an ant. Staring at Obito's murderous face, Dustless smiled faintly, especially when he looked at the kunai coming towards him. He shook his head with contempt. This kind of child's toys can't hurt me, let alone kill me. Shaking his head, Dustless looked at Obito with pity. Rin was killed by him, but the act still has to go on. He can't say that his little lover was killed by me, right? Although Dustless sympathized with Obito, there were too many people in the world who had a hard life, just like the sand in the Ganges. Whoosh. The sharp kunai pierced through Dustless's body, but Dustless himself was fine. This? Obito looked at Dustless in a daze. This was the first time he saw such a strange scene in his life. For a moment, his hatred for Minato disappeared and his eyes were dull. Under the surprised gaze of Uchiha Obito, Dustless's finger rose and stopped at Uchiha Obito's eyebrows, and then he flicked it lightly. Boom. Although Dustless just flicked his finger casually and didn't even touch his face, Obito felt like he was kicked by a thick leg that weighed thousands of pounds. This guy isn't Kyuubi's cousin, is he? Obito's mouth twitched and his tone was full of surprise, looking at Dustless in disbelief. However, White Zetsu on the side was unusually calm. Someone who can fight with Madara can't be ordinary. Now you realize how fragile you are. The Mangekyo Sharingan is not invincible, especially you who only has 1 Mangekyo Sharingan. It's impossible for you to be the opponent of Minato. Looking at Obito's unwilling face, Dustless shook his head. He spent a lot of effort to turn Obito into the black and he didn't want him to die in vain. Minato's strength was also not bad. Not to mention that Obito had just opened his Mangekyo, and he didn't have complete control of the Mangekyo Sharingan. Even if Obito attacked Konoha in the future, Minato didn't get any advantage and instead got himself into trouble. Rin is my everything, and anyone who stands in the way of my revenge is the enemy of Uchiha Obito. His mask was broken by Dustless, and Obito no longer hid his identity. He gritted his teeth and said to Dustless, "You seem to know that old man, Uchiha Madara. Although he saved me, if you stop me I will kill you." Obito's face was full of killing intent, and his Mangekyo flashed with a demonic light. Obviously he was serious. "Just you?" Hearing this, Dustless was stunned at first and then immediately sneered at Obito. Even Madara didn't dare to say that he could take him down. He didn't expect that this kid would dare to say that he could kill him. It seems that the lesson just now didn't make him more aware of his strength, but made him even more arrogant. A mere firefly's light wants to shine with the moon. Well, today I will let you see how weak you are. Looking at Obito's stubborn face, Dustless suddenly made a decision in his heart. It was good to teach Obito a lesson now, lest this kid keep staring at him in the future. Maybe one day he would be bold enough to plot against him. In that case, I will let you see the power of the legendary Mangekyo Sharingan. Chapter 113. The Sharingan is the soul portrayal eye. Everyone's pursuit is different, so their abilities are different. Among them, Uchiha Obito and Uchiha Shisui are the best. Whether it is Obito's Kamui or Shisui's Koto Amatsukami, Both are extremely powerful ninjutsu, especially Shursui, which has almost no means of defense. No matter who you are, I advise you to mind your own business. The ability of my Manjikyu Sharingan is not something you can defend against. Staring at Dustless, who was wearing a spiral mask, Obito's tone was cold and he didn't hide his killing intent, but he still didn't make a move. Whether it's because of Uchiha Obito's fear of Dustless's strength or some other reason, there's no doubt about it. Although the current Uchiha Obito has been corrupted, it can be seen that he still has a conscience for the time being. If it was the future Uchiha Obito, he might have already killed Dustless. Come at me, no ninjutsu is effective in front of me. Dustless smiled happily under the mask and his eyes were always calm. Although the ability of Kamui is elusive, there are also loopholes and shortcomings. The basic principle is to transfer one's body or other objects from the real space to another space, interfering with the real space to achieve various effects. The biggest weakness is that when absorbing or releasing objects, the body must be solid, and because the chakra must be concentrated in the eyes to launch Kamui, the body is vulnerable to attack. The later yondaime of Konami Namikaze Minato used this ability to cause physical damage to Obito, and some can only be used for passive defense and can't attack others. Since you're not coming, I'll go. Seeing that Obito didn't move for a long time, Dustless frowned slightly and immediately changed from defense to offense. His whole body turned into a shining light as he crossed the space and almost instantly appeared in front of Obito. Laser. Dustless, who intended to teach Obito a lesson, naturally didn't hold back, and directly swept a beam, of course, aiming at Obito's arm. After all, Dustless still needs him. Boom. The golden light passed through Obito's body, and broke a few trees not far behind him. Just the power shown casually gave a feeling of destruction. Penetrated? The golden light passed through Obito's body, but there was no wound on his body. Obviously, he had already guessed that Dustless would attack and was prepared in advance and grasped the timing very well. But so what? In the face of absolute speed, any ability is pale and powerless. After a brief surprise, Dustless's mouth raised a cold light, and at this time Obito, who had finished Obito, took the opportunity to pull away from Dustless. This guy's strength is terrifying. Staring at Dustless, Uchiha Obito thought to himself with a vigilant expression. Since you want to cross over my body to avenge Noera Rin, why are you pulling away from me? Dustless glanced at Obito from the corner of his eyes and said indifferently, "You will never be able to avenge that little girl. You're just trying to cover up your powerlessness because you can't touch me." In response to Dustless's sneer, Obito also chose to ridicule him. In his opinion, Dustless was just trying to cover up his embarrassment and protest. The ignorant are fearless. Hearing this, Dustless couldn't help but shake his head. In fact, as long as you know the principle of Kamui, it's very easy to crack it. As long as Dustless wanted to, he could almost instantly crush Obito. Have you ever been kicked at the speed of light, Obito? A lazy voice sounded. Wuxia squinted his eyes and looked at Uchiha Obito lazily. Unconsciously, he also liked Kizaru's catchphrase. Obito was taken aback, and after thinking about it, he frowned and looked at Dustless. It doesn't matter if you don't understand, no one in the world understands the speed of light. Seeing Obito's puzzled look, Dustless just smiled casually, and then his eyes became cold and he said coldly, "You will soon understand what the speed of light is, little devil." Speed of light kick. Boom. As soon as Dustless's voice fell, Obito was kicked away, and even with the terrifying insight of Mangekyo, he couldn't see the trajectory of Dustless's movement. Obito didn't see how Dustless ran over. Puchi. Looking at the deep hole in his chest, Obito's face was pale, and he spat out red blood from the corner of his mouth. He finally understood the meaning of Dustless's words. It means that when Dustless's body glows with golden light, everything will end. This is the speed of light. Tsukuyomi. Taking advantage of Obito's sluggish look, Dustless used Tsukuyomi's powerful genjutsu to instantly put him down. This kid is simply courting death by challenging Minato now. He can wait until Kyuubi attacks Konoha in the future. Dustless. Looking at the unconscious Obito, Dustless's eyes were emotionless, and then he looked up at the sky and his eyes looked at the void in front of him with contempt, and his aura was extremely cold. It was even more domineering than Madara. Dustless Sama. White Zetsu suddenly came out from the depths of the ground, his face full of respect. As the saying goes, the onlooker sees the game best. Why did Dustless give Obito the time to launch Kamui? He should have been able to kill Obito instantly, just like now. Uchiha Madara may not understand, but White Zetsu saw through it. The reason why Obito used Kamui was deliberately done by Dustless. That was to completely destroy his confidence, and to tell Madara that in the face of absolute speed, any technique is invalid. Chapter 114. White Zetsu didn't know the true strength of Uchiha Wuchen, and he didn't want to know. In his opinion, those who tried to test Wuchen's true strength must have been completely wiped out, crushed like insects. Of course, those who Dustless deliberately let go were excluded. "Bring this little brat back," said Wuchen indifferently. He didn't even look at Baizu. Then he walked away and soon disappeared from everyone's sight. On the other side, in the Rain Village, a different scene was playing out. The Rain Village, as its name suggests, has 4 seasons throughout the year. This village has always been closed off from the outside world, giving people an extremely mysterious feeling. However, due to the existence of Hanzo the Salamander, who has the title of demigod, although the outside world is very curious about the existence of this village, not many people dare to enter without permission. Even if a demigod isn't a god, it's still a super powerful existence, on the same level as the leaders of the 5 great villages. It's really interesting. I love to see people killing each other. Wuchen was wearing a cloak. His dark eyes were full of interest as he watched the 2 parties fighting. A wicked smile appeared on his face, which made people shudder with fear. The 2 sides were wearing different costumes, but their appearance was similar, and they were staring at each other fiercely. Obviously, they belonged to 2 opposing groups, and the group wearing the Rain Ninja's costume obviously had the upper hand. The centaur who had the upper hand looked down at the crowd below with disdain and complacency on their faces. "Yahiko, Nagato, get out of here, this guy is obviously coming for you too." An anxious and worried voice came from the mouth of the purple-haired girl, who was tightly bound by 2 burly Rain Ninjas and couldn't move. The people fighting below were the Rain Ninjas of the Akatsuki and Hanzo the Salamander. The girl with light blue-purple hair who was shouting at Yahiko and Nagato to leave was undoubtedly Konan. The situation in front of them was as clear as a mirror. The Akatsuki's Konan was captured by Hanzo, so she was naturally at a disadvantage, and the Rain Ninjas were all proud of themselves. Still as stupid as before. Staring at Konan's anxious face, Dustless disdainfully curled his lips. Yahiko was an optimistic person who valued his teammates very much, and he would never leave. There's no cure for this idiot. Looking at Yahiko, Wuchen's eyes flashed with deep disdain. It was precisely because this kid listened to Hanzo's slanderous words that Xiao fell into his trap and Konan was caught. It was entirely his own fault, he can't blame anyone else. "Release Konan, I'll spare your life, Hanzo the Salamander." Uzumaki Nagato's eyes swept with endless cold light, and stared at the man with an iron mask on the cliff in front of him, and his cold voice spread, accompanied with endless killing intent, which made people's scalp numb. This kid's control of the Rinnegan seems to have become better than before. Dustless slightly pressed down the cloak on his head, and his pupils flashed with a touch of surprise, and he was quite surprised. Obviously, after the short fight with Dustless last time, Nagato knew the gap between his strength and Dustless's, so he deliberately went back to train and familiarize himself with the various abilities of the Rinnegan. "Idiot, if it weren't for your eyes, you wouldn't be able to use some jutsu." Dustless sighed for Nagato and shook his head. Even if Nagato worked hard for 100 years, he still wouldn't be able to use Madara's soul, border prison jutsu. Just like how Dustless transplanted Madara's Rinnegan, he didn't have the confidence to use the soul, border prison jutsu. Only by thoroughly defeating Madara through the system can he take everything from him. "Let her go." On the cliff, Hanzo the Salamander was wearing a mask, but everyone could see the contempt on his face, and he sneered, "You can't let this girl go unless you kill her." Hanzo the Salamander said to the red-haired Nagato, and at the same time pointed to the orange-haired Yahiko. "You want to fight me? I'm still too inexperienced." Hanzo the Salamander's eyes swept over Nagato and Yahiko, and he was extremely proud of himself. In fact, before this plan to deceive the Akatsuki, he spent a lot of time and effort to investigate the three leaders of the Akatsuki: Yahiko, Nagato, and Konan. After knowing that Yahiko was a person who valued friendship and righteousness, he came up with this plan. If Yahiko was a person with a heart of stone, such a plan wouldn't work on him. How do you choose? The leader of the Akatsuki, Yahiko? Hanzo the salamander stared at the expressionless Yahiko with a gloomy and terrible look. His friend's choice was the same as his own life, and for him, it was the most interesting topic in life. Nagato, kill me. Yahiko turned around and said indifferently to Nagato. His eyes were full of despair at the prospect of death. Yahiko, are you crazy? Nagato looked at Yahiko in disbelief. Hanzo the salamander was obviously plotting against them. Even if he killed Yahiko, he was sure that he wouldn't let Konan and the Akatsuki go. However, Yahiko just smiled indifferently. Looking at the kunai in Nagato's hand, he didn't hesitate to rush forward. Puchi. Bright red blood dripped to the ground and a sad atmosphere spread. Looking up, Yahiko's abdomen was pierced with a sharp kunai. Nagato looked at Yahiko, who was willing to die under his hands, and his eyes were full of despair. Due to excessive sadness, he lost his ability to think. This problematic child is finally King dead. Dustless in the distance breathed a sigh of relief. If Yahiko's death hadn't made Nagato despair, Dustless wouldn't have been able to convince him to join them. As for Obito, he was already defeated by Dustless's Tsukuyami. Chapter 115. After all, Yahiko was very similar to Uzumaki Naruto in all aspects, and their personalities were even more similar. Let go of Konan. Seeing his most precious friend die in front of him, Uzumaki Nagato's murderous aura poured out like a storm, making the situation even more terrifying. Let her go. After staring at Yahiko's body for a while, Hanzo the salamander breathed a sigh of relief. He waved his hand, and the two ninjas who were holding Konan looked at each other and immediately released her. But at the same time, their eyes flashed with a cunning and cruel smile. After Yahiko's death, Uzumaki Nagato's eyes were fixed on Konan, and her safety was more important than his own. Although the emotional changes of the two ninjas were very weak, Uzumaki Nagato could see it clearly with his Rinnegan. Get away from Konan. Uzumaki Nagato's roar was like a thunderbolt in Konan's ears. She subconsciously turned her head and saw the two ninjas rushing towards her. She was about to die. What a troublesome little girl. In the distance, Dustless, who was wearing a cloak, slightly lowered the brim of his hat, and his eyes flashed with helplessness. He looked at Konan's panicked face and slowly shook his head. He lifted his 5 fingers and pointed at Konan, and a majestic and irresistible suction force erupted from his hand. Konan's pupils turned white, and her pretty face was filled with a strange sadness. She closed her eyes and waited for her death. Perhaps with Yahiko's death, her heart was filled with despair. She stopped resisting and wanted to accompany Yahiko to the afterlife. The dead are gone and you are still young. You should look at your future with a long-term vision. The calm, tranquil, and slightly aged voice rang out. Xiaonan suddenly felt that her body was incomparably light and agile. She subconsciously opened her lively and beautiful eyes. She didn't know when, but Konan was floating in the air. This is... Staring blankly at the crowd below, Xiaonan's eyes were filled with astonishment. Soon after, she felt a majestic and irresistible force of absolute gravity behind her. It was like the hand of God, making her unable to move. She suddenly turned her head, her cold eyes fixed on the distant mountain peak, on the thin figure who was isolated from the rest of the world. The young man was wearing a trench coat embroidered with red clouds. He had a mysterious temperament. He wore a bamboo hat with a wind chime on his head and a spiral-shaped mask on his face. It was impossible to see his face. He opened his hand and casually pointed it at Xiaonan. However, Xiaonan felt as if she was in a god's domain. Her body's various functions were absolutely restricted. She couldn't move, let alone break free. Spirit summoning, heretic demon statue. Seeing Konan safe and sound and being rescued by a mysterious person wearing a spiral mask, Nagato was relieved, and the heavy burden in his heart disappeared. Yahiko entrusted him with Conan's protection, and even if he died he couldn't let her be in danger. Ka. The space behind Nagato suddenly cracked and a giant in the form of a dead tree came out of the void. Its mouth was full of sharp teeth like the teeth of a shark. Ayo. A depressing roar came out of the giant's mouth. It seemed that the vortex Nagato's power wasn't strong enough, and the summoned giant faintly shrank back. Ha! The Rinnegan surged with ripples and black lines spread out. Staring at Hanzo, Nagato suddenly clapped his hands and immediately shouted. Pucci! There was no doubt that the monster was the Gedo Mazo. It opened its mouth again and countless black iron rods shot out from its mouth, like blades inserted into Uzumaki Nagato's body, absorbing his chakra and vitality. Nagato's chakra wasn't enough, so he could only replace it with his own vitality. After a while Uzumaki Nagato's body shriveled up, leaving only skin and bones. His face was pale and weak. Nagato. Looking at the shriveled body, Conan's watery eyes were full of worry and pain, and at the same time her body fell to Dustless's side. Look carefully, the scene in front of you is the essence of this cruel world. The body fragrance of the orchid in the empty valley inevitably entered his ears and nose. Behind the mask, Wu Chen's face was a little unnatural, but it was quickly restrained. He whispered to Xiaonan. Ayo. The Gedo demon statue roared again. A thick transparent dragon came out of the Gedo demon statue's mouth. It was like a wild beast out of its cage and it roared to the sky. Conan looked at the endless transparent dragon in horror. Looking at the dragon coming out of the Gedo Mazo's mouth, her soul trembled. There's nothing to be surprised about, his chakra and strength are limited, and he can't exert the power of the Gedo Mazo to the limit. Looking at the transparent dragon roaring in the sky, Dustless's eyes flashed with sarcasm. This monster can scare others, but for him it's just a piece of cake. The Gedo Mazo is the outer shell of the Jubi, and Nagato can only exert 30% of its power. Staring at the surprised Hanzo and the others on the cliff, Dustless's eyes turned quickly, and his body erupted with a strong aura, and a very oppressive aura floated from Dustless's body. After fusing with Hashirama's chakra, Dustless could control the Gedo Mazo even without the legendary Rinnegan. Let me control the Gedo Mazo. I'll let you guys see the power of the legendary Gedo Mazo even without chakra. It can still destroy the world. Chapter 116. The Gedo Mazo used to be the shell of the Jubi. As the body of the Jubi, its power was beyond doubt. Even without chakra, its power should not be underestimated. Uzumaki Nagato was not Madara, and he did not open the Rinnegan. Let alone Madara, even Dustless's control of the Gedo Mazo was not comparable to Uzumaki Nagato. A powerful eye power overflowed from Dustless's eyes, and the chakra spear that was spat out from the Gedo statue's mouth disappeared. It was sucked back into the Gedo statue's mouth. What's going on? Uzumaki Nagato stared blankly at the Gedo Mazo Nagato, who had returned to its mouth. His pale face suddenly turned black, and he looked at the numerous black iron rods behind him indignantly. His heart was particularly tangled and depressed. Didn't this mean that all his previous efforts were in vain? Although I don't understand what happened, but it seems that kid's technique failed. In short, that kid's Rinnegan belongs to me this time. Looking at Nagato's shocked face, Hanzo the salamander smiled gloomily. The legendary Rinnegan is a god's eye that is above the Sharingan and Byakugan. It was about to be used by him. Ignorant fool, do you think anyone can use Rinnegan? Dustless, who was wearing the spiral mask, saw the passion in Hanzo's eyes. He sneered again and again with endless contempt in his voice. Nagato was a descendant of the Six Paths, and the burden of using the Rinnegan was so great, let alone Hanzo, who had nothing to do with the Sage of the Six Paths. Come out, Gedo Golem. Dustless stared at the Gedo demon statue that was hidden in the void with only half of its head exposed. His gaze froze and he raised his strength to the maximum. Ayo. Ka. The Gedo Golem's angry voice resounded through the clouds and a powerful shockwave came out of its mouth. The terrifying shockwave caused everyone to retreat. Under everyone's horrified gazes, the Gedo Golem's huge hands tore apart the space on both sides. The terrifying power caused the space crack to expand continuously. This feeling. Impossible. Could it be that the ghetto golem has already escaped my control? Uzumaki Nagato felt that he had lost contact with the ghetto mazo, and he looked at it in disbelief. Just now, it seemed that some kind of superpower directly cut off his connection with the ghetto mazo. His face was pale and his rinnegan flashed with different emotions. Nagato didn't expect that the ghetto mazo, which could only be controlled by the rinnegan, could be taken away. And looking at the current state of the ghetto mazo, it was obvious that the caster behind it was much stronger than him. In particular, the deafening roar from the ghetto mazo's mouth made Nagato's soul tremble in fear. As he formed a mudra with both of his hands, a stronger chakra wave was emitted from Dustless's body. The ominous and decaying aura of the demonic statue of Ghetto became even thicker. What kind of monster is this? Seeing the situation rapidly deteriorating, Hanzo the salamander, who had been quietly watching and planning to seize the opportunity to seize the rinnegan, his old face turned purple. How was this a failure of the spell casting? It was clearly the ghetto golem receiving an even stronger summon. Could it be him? Suddenly remembering the mysterious black-clothed man who rescued Xiaonan, Hanzo subconsciously looked over. Although Dustless's mask and hat covered his face, Hanzo could still see the contempt in Dustless's eyes. Uzumaki Nagato also looked at Dustless. The difference was that Dustless gave him a familiar feeling. Oayo. Ping ping ping. The ghetto golem roared angrily at the sky once again. Its powerful withered tree arm unleashed its full power, completely tearing apart the space that enveloped its body. Its huge body fell from the sky, causing the entire ground to tremble. A few meters of sand and dust were stirred up and it immediately exploded. So big. The ghetto golem's dozens of meters tall withered tree body suddenly reflected in the eyes of the world. Everyone unconsciously held their breath, looking at the towering giant in horror. The uneven layers of thick muscles all over its body were particularly terrifying. The ancient aura of decay overflowing from its body was particularly oppressive. The 9 incomparably ferocious eyes were like a demon from hell, and the 10 column-shaped bulges on its back made people involuntarily afraid of this prehistoric creature in front of them. This height is estimated to be comparable to Uchiha Madara's ultimate body. Dustless also saw the ghetto golem for the first time in broad daylight. At the same time, he compared Madara's ultimate body to the ghetto golem in his heart. Are you the one who controls the ghetto golem? Dustless's voice was naturally heard by Conan, and her pretty face changed dramatically. You actually know that it's the ghetto golem. It seems that Uzumaki Nagato told you a lot about the rinnegan. Dustless turned his head and glanced at Conan in surprise. Then he calmed down and said with a calm tone, Uzumaki Nagato has the rinnegan and he does have the ability to control the ghetto golem, but he's not the only one. Dustless still remembered that Uchiha Itachi used to control the ghetto golem without the rinnegan. This means that as long as a large number of Hashirama's cells were integrated into the body, he could control the ghetto golem even without the rinnegan. Moreover, his control was more proficient than Uzumaki Nagato with the rinnegan. Who the hell are you? Seeing that Dustless was omniscient, Conan frowned and asked curiously. Dustless wasn't hostile to her. Conan naturally knew that Dustless wasn't hostile to her, so she didn't guard against him. Who am I? At least for now, I'm your friend, an ally who can drag you from hell to heaven. After saying that, without waiting for Conan to speak, the ghetto golem's huge body suddenly fell to the ground with its hands on the ground. 10 pillar-shaped protrusions on its back swept a dazzling silver lightning. Pa. Intense destructive lightning flashed on the back of the demonic statue of Ghetto. Crackling sounds could be heard as a blinding light flashed across the void. It was as if a divine sword had slashed the sky apart. The violent lightning was like a punishment from the heavens. Everything in the world seemed to be on the verge of collapse. Chapter 117. The razor-sharp lightning that could pierce through everything surged out like a tide, covering an area that was unprecedentedly vast and boundless. Almost all the creatures felt a sense of oppression, and a sense of despair involuntarily rose up in their hearts. There was no need to deliberately target, just a simple sweep. What a terrifying range and attack power. His eyes slightly narrowed. Standing on the top of the mountain, Hanzo stared at the silver light on the back of the Gedomazo and took a deep breath. His pupils were filled with uncertainty, and a sense of fear appeared in his heart. And that kid's ability is so strange, his strength is so terrifying, like a pool of stagnant water. I can't see through him. Suddenly looking up, looking at the masked man Dustless who was standing side by side with Conan, Hanzo's heart inevitably sank. The enemy wasn't terrifying, but an enemy like Wuxian was undoubtedly the most terrifying. His entire body was covered in a mysterious veil. Moreover, his strength was extremely extraordinary. It was as if he had appeared out of thin air. There was no trace that could be found. What a terrifying strength! He can even control a summoned beast that can only be controlled by the Rinnegan, and it seems that he is more proficient than Uzumaki Nagato. Speaking of this, Hanzo the salamander suspected that his brain wasn't big enough. Rinnegan's summoned beast was forcibly snatched away by others. Not to mention that Wuxian was even more proficient in using the Gedomazo. It was really beyond his scope of understanding. Sighing, Hanzo the salamander knew that if he didn't admit defeat this time, he might lose his life here. Although he had the strength of a demigod, Dustless's ability was already in the realm of gods. All troops retreat. Without thinking, Hanzo directly ordered all the ninjas of the Rain Village to retreat. For a cunning person like him, a temporary defeat was nothing, it was just a trivial matter. Anyway, the leader of the Akatsuki Yahiko was completely dead. Maybe in the near future the Akatsuki would fall apart. The Rain Ninjas looked at Hanzo, who was the first to leave, and immediately looked at each other and left one after another. Damned bastard, I will definitely kill you in the future. Turning his head to stare at the masked man Dustless, Hanzo the salamander's hatred for Dustless had reached its peak. He couldn't wait to eat his flesh and drink his blood. In short, even if he dismembered Dustless into 1,000 pieces, it still wouldn't be able to reduce the volcanic eruption of anger in his heart. Without Dustless's interference, maybe the Rinnegan would have already been captured, and the Rain Village under his leadership would have also risen strongly and become a village on the same level as the 5 great ninja villages, or even above them. You still want to run? You actually still want to run in front of me? Looking at the Rain Ninja who wanted to escape, Dustless sneered as he understood Hanzo's despicable approach. Except for him, all of you go to hell. With a contemptuous smile on his face, Dustless's pupils suddenly enlarged and a strong energy fluctuation came out. The lightning behind the Gedomazo was obviously shining to the extreme. Like a spider web, the lightning erupted out, and the endless void suddenly trembled. Whoosh! The speed of the lightning was naturally extremely fast. Its speed was so fast that it disappeared the moment it appeared. It was far beyond the limit of human vision, and the moment it appeared again, it covered the Rain Ninja who was fleeing in panic. Boom, boom, boom. Even without a scream, the Rain Ninja was directly eroded by the huge silver lightning, and in the blink of an eye, his whole body was swallowed. The ninja who was hit was lying on the ground, motionless. There was no breath of life and he had stopped breathing. Obviously he was dead. Only Hanzo the salamander was spared. Why didn't you kill him? You should have the ability to kill him. Seeing Hanzo completely disappear, Conan's pretty face turned black, and she stared at Dustless, and the good impression she had for Dustless disappeared. Hanzo the salamander was also in the range of the Gedomazo's lightning, but he was able to escape unscathed. Obviously Dustless did this deliberately. Hanzo the salamander must be killed by him. Pointing to Uzumaki Nagato, Dustless said indifferently, even if I kill Hanzo the salamander, he will live in the shadow of Yahiko's death for the rest of his life, and it must be done by him. Although Uzumaki Nagato would live in the shadow of Yahiko's death, Hanzo the salamander must be killed by him. Otherwise, Dustless was sure that Uzumaki Nagato would never be able to let go of Yahiko's death. Is that so? Conan's eyes flashed and her eyes were faintly filled with tears, and she looked like she was about to cry. Her whole body was filled with sadness, and her delicate body was as weak as a willow branch, and she fell towards Dustless. Thinking of the twists and turns in the life of Yahiko and the others, the world couldn't help but sigh at the impermanence of the world. And who was the one who caused all of this? This is the essence of this world: the weak are prey to the strong. The so-called bridge to communicate and understand people's hearts is illusory, and it only exists in the world of dreams. Instead of letting the world live in pain, It's better for us to work together and create a country of dreams. Dustless caught Conan, who was falling with the wind, and feeling the warmth from her delicate hands, his mind couldn't help but shake and he took a deep breath. After stabilizing the strange emotions in his heart, Dustless regained his calm. "Who the hell are you?" Quickly breaking free from Dustless's hand, Conan's face was very unnatural, especially when she felt Dustless's body heat, which made her even more uncomfortable. In order to hide her embarrassment, she looked at Dustless and said coldly, "Akatsuki doesn't need to cooperate with people like you." "Is that so? That's a pity. But what you say doesn't seem to count." With a sigh of pity, Dustless walked towards Uzumaki Nagato. When a person suffers a huge blow, their spirit and emotions will be abnormally weak, and as long as there is a little temptation, Dustless is sure that Uzumaki Nagato will take the bait. Chapter 118. Staring at Nagato's pupils, Dustless breathed a sigh of relief. He was afraid that Nagato would use one of the most powerful forbidden jutsu of the Rinnegan, the Outer Path, reincarnation of the heavens, to resurrect Yahiko. But obviously he was overthinking, as Nagato probably hadn't mastered this jutsu yet. Otherwise, with Nagato's nature, he would definitely resurrect Yahiko. "Nagato, you..." Conan looked at the numerous black iron rods behind Nagato, and her beautiful eyes flashed with self-blame. If she wasn't caught by Hanzo, Nagato wouldn't be like this and Yahiko wouldn't have died because of her. "Conan, I'm fine." Uzumaki Nagato shook his head and gave Conan a look of concern, indicating that there was no need to worry. Then his eyes fell on Dustless. His eyes rippled, and he immediately lowered his head as if he was thinking about something. Nagato wasn't stupid, and he knew that he and Dustless weren't in the same dimension. Especially when he saved Conan, he knew that Dustless wasn't hostile to them. "People will always die." Feeling the deep sadness oozing from Conan and Uzumaki Nagato, he seemed to be affected as well, and Dustless couldn't speak directly. "Everything rises and falls because of fate. Even if Yahiko died, he didn't want to see you like this, just like this rain, just like his crying." Suddenly the rain poured down as if venting its dissatisfaction, mercilessly raging on the earth. Dustless's body emitted a faint halo, covering the three of them, and quietly looking at the world in the rain, the atmosphere was particularly oppressive. "I won't inherit Yahiko's will." "Yahiko, he was wrong." After a moment of silence, Nagato's face suddenly became ferocious, and his eyes emitted a cold light, giving the feeling that he had fallen into the devil's path, and his whole body was cold and isolated from the world. No matter who, in the face of the death of their loved one, would have a great change of heart. Just like Nagato now, it was because of Yahiko's death that he saw the world more clearly, and looked at it with an unprecedented vision. "Why do you say that?" Hearing this, Dustless asked with a deadpan expression, and the corner of his mouth raised into a smile, but it couldn't be seen because of the mask. "The bridge to everyone's heart doesn't exist." With a cold sneer on his face, Nagato's murderous intent spread out like a tide, and the rain that was close to Dustless and the others took a detour. "People who don't understand the pain of war and war can't understand the preciousness of peace like us. For those who have never experienced pain, war only exists in their imagination's imagination. Only pain can make them understand the preciousness of peace, and piously pray for peace to come. In other words, only those who know of pain know of peace," Nagato said in a heavy tone, with an unprecedented determination. Yahiko's death could be said to have changed his temperament, giving him a new goal in life. Nonsense. Looking at Nagato, who seemed to have come back from the dead, Dustless sneered. The so-called peace didn't matter to Dustless, but Nagato didn't have the right to give pain to the world, nor did he have the qualification to do so. However, Uzumaki Nagato's current situation was exactly as Madara had planned. "So what's your next goal? Using Rinnegan to destroy the world, or?" Looking at Akatsuki's uniform, Dustless said meaningfully. Hearing Dustless's words, Nagato's Rinnegan surged with a cold luster. "I must establish a huge organization, one that covers the whole world." Nagato's eyes were full of light and his tone was resolute and irrefutable. A huge plan quickly took shape in his heart, and he already had a basic outline. Yahiko's establishment of the Akatsuki was his greatest legacy. Of course, all the ordinary ninjas were completely eliminated. After this battle, Uzumaki Nagato understood that in the face of absolute power, numbers didn't matter at all. Just like Dustless did before. Seeing Nagato's face full of determination, Dustless was relieved. He was really afraid that his words weren't as good as Obito's and he couldn't fool Nagato. Seems that he was thinking too much. Time flew by like a white steed, unknowingly passing by extremely quickly. During this period, a lot of major events happened. The most sensational event was the end of the Battle of Kanushi Bridge, which ended with the victory of Konoha's ninja led by Minato. The Rock Village surrendered, which also marked Konoha's victory. Minato was also promoted to the position of the fourth Hokage, which was a joyous occasion for him. The one who couldn't accept it the most was Obito. He even knew that after Minato became the Hokage, his other body that was slowly repairing and fusing with his body cracked again due to his violent rage. Obito believed that everything that Minato had today was because of Rin's death. The reconstruction of the Akatsuki was also progressing in an orderly manner. All the former S-class ninjas were plundered by Dustless, but they weren't complete yet. Those who disobeyed Nagato's orders were all subdued by Tendo Pain's power. Akatsuki, this is the real establishment. In the warm pool, Dustless leaned on the side, leisurely closed his eyes, and enjoyed the service of the beautiful woman behind him. Her silver hair was spotless and flowed down like a waterfall. Her impressive figure was curvaceous and half of her breasts were covered. Perhaps it was because she was twisting too much, there were even some pink cherry blossoms that could be seen. She was the one who scrubbed Dustless's back. I said, be gentle, this is human skin, not iron skin. Feeling the stinging pain on his back, Dustless was speechless and shouted angrily. He just wanted to relax in the bath, but he didn't expect Otsutsuki to suddenly attack him. Dustless didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Chapter 119. Otsutsuki Haguro looked at Wuchan's smooth back with dissatisfaction. His expression was fierce. This kid came to Earth only to carry out Madara's so-called Eye of the Moon plan, but he didn't care about her at all. How could she not be angry? Her jade-like hand touched the tender flesh of Dustless's waist, and immediately made a 360-degree turn without mercy. Ouch! It hurts, are you crazy? The piercing pain spread all over his nerves. Dustless turned his head angrily and glared at Otsutsuki Haguro. Looking at her white and delicate face, he knew that this tigress was not looking for him with good intentions. Otsutsuki Haguro looked coldly at the angry Dustless and said without showing any weakness, "Have you forgotten what you promised me on the moon? Now your actions are just putting your so-called plan into effect." At the end of her words, Otsutsuki Haguro looked at Dustless with fire in her eyes, and her pretty face condensed into ice. This guy not only has no intention of marrying her, but also plays all day long. Especially recently he has been very close to Konan in the Akatsuki. Dustless's anger disappeared in an instant and his face began to become unnatural. Otsutsuki Haguro sincerely helped Dustless, but this woman's unrealistic idea really made Dustless quite entangled. Dustless naturally understood Otsutsuki Haguro's idea. She wanted to use him to create a new Otsutsuki family. How can I let you succeed? Wu Chen's brain cells spun intensely. His eyes suddenly lit up and he came up with a plan. He smiled and said, "I'm still young now. You should let me grow up for a few more years. How can my skinny arms and legs withstand your oppression?" The age gap was too big. Although a few years have passed, Dustless was still young, and Otsutsuki Haguro was already more than 20 years old. Of course, this was also an excuse for Dustless. Although he was still young, his physique was unusually strong due to regular exercise, and his physical ability in all aspects of his body was naturally not bad. The reason why he said so was too perfunctory. Fush. Otsutsuki Haguro jumped into the pool and walked gracefully in front of Dustless. Her phoenix-like eyes looked at Dustless and she frowned and asked, "Not small, I have seen it. Obviously not small." After that, Otsutsuki Haguro looked at Dustless's body with a puzzled face. King. Seeing this, Dustless's mouth twitched fiercely and black lines hung on his forehead. His lungs churned and blood almost burst out of his mouth. I didn't mean that. Our age gap is too big, you have to let me grow up for a few more years. Otsutsuki Haguro's eyes. Haguro's eyes. Otsutsuki Haguro's eyes Haguro, sighs. Dustless was really afraid he was really out of her, out. Was Haguro. Dustless Haguro, that's right. Hearing this, Otsutsuki Haguro suddenly froze. Only then did she realize that although Dustless was taller than her, the age gap between the two was still quite big. But that's not important. Haguro blinked, biting her jade finger, and said very seriously, "Those daimyo's children start when they are 11 or 12 years old." Stop. Dustless's mouth twitched again. He looked at Haguro and said sarcastically, "You even investigated this kind of thing. Is there a need to investigate this? This is a well-known thing." Haguro rolled her eyes and looked at Dustless contemptuously. The children of ordinary families began to take on the responsibility of carrying on the family line at the age of 15 or 16 years old. Even the only son of some big families had prepared a wife in advance to strengthen the family line. "You perfunctory all day long, do you take my affairs to heart?" Seeing Dustless just bowing his head in silence, Haguro's face changed slightly, and her tone was no longer as harsh as before. Opening his mouth, Dustless, who wanted to refuse Otsutsuki Yuro, took back his words. He looked up and saw some tears in Otsutsuki Yuro's eyes. "After a month, I promise to give you a satisfactory answer." Dustless pulled Otsutsuki into his arms and gently patted his shoulder. His action was unprecedentedly bold. His lips pressed against Otsutsuki's, and his little hands began to move restlessly. The deep blue starry sky stretched as far as the eye could see. It was beautiful beyond compare. Countless specks of light adorned the starry sky, making it seem like a mythical world. The fresh and refined air made one feel refreshed. It was the world inside the system. Dustless looked at Lingro, who was standing in the distance like a goddess above the 9 heavens. His lips twitched slightly and ripples appeared in his eyes. "Who are you going to train with this time?" Lingro's emotionless tone drifted out of her mouth. She always maintained an unchanging indifference. She never had any emotional fluctuations. Combined with the girl's natural beauty, this was the only flaw. "Of course, it's brother Uchiha," Wuxian said carelessly. His tone was full of confidence. The characters that were trained by the system were at their peak, which meant that Erjuzi would be at his most powerful period. Uchiha. Hearing this, Lingro was stunned. Apparently she didn't know who Uchiha was. She looked at Dustless in confusion. "Of course, it's Uchiha Sasuke's long-out yen," Dustless said with dissatisfaction. To be honest, he didn't like Uchiha Sasuke at all. He was even a little disgusted. However, as the saying goes, persimmons are easy to pinch. Although Dustless wanted to train with Uchiha Madara, this training was different. It was a training with his life on the line. If he lost, he couldn't start again. Moreover, the system's characters were at their strongest when they were alive, which meant that Dustless might face the Jubi's Jinchuriki, Uchiha Madara. Although Dustless was conceited, he wasn't sure if he could face Uchiha Madara alone. After all, he was gambling with his life. Failure meant complete death. Naturally, he could only start with Uchiha Madara. Chapter 120. After all, the gap between Uchiha Sasuke and Uchiha Madara is obvious to all. And this kid has something that Dustless values the most: Indra's reincarnation identity. Although Uchiha Madara also has it, in comparison, Dustless chose the weaker Sasuke. In that case, as you wish, but this time is different from the past. Once you lose, you will be completely obliterated. I don't need to say this. Lingna's heavenly voice rang out once again. It was still like an ancient well without any ripples, without any human emotions. It was as if it had been programmed in advance, filled with killing intent. Once I step out, I will never regret it. Even if the corpse in front of me falls into the sea of blood, my heart will not change. Come at me. The corner of his mouth slightly raised, Dustless's handsome face showed a wild and unruly smile, and the vast chakra broke out like a vast ocean. The golden chakra rendered the entire sky, and all the endless sky was dyed golden. Under Dustless's indifferent annotation, Linger's whole body suddenly changed, and he became a handsome young man who looked like Dustless. The young man had sharp edges and corners. His face was handsome and clean as if it was carved by a knife. His white skin was like ice and snow. His messy hair danced with the wind. He was even more unruly. The piercingly cold, killing intent and decisiveness between his brows were quite similar to Wu Chen's. His temperament was cold and unapproachable. It was Uchiha Sasuke. 6 Tomo Rinnegan and Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. If I'm not careful, I may really fall. Staring at the Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan of Sasuke's single eye, and the obvious 6 Tomo Rinnegan, Dustless felt the extremely powerful dark eye power in it, and he thought very seriously. Although Dustless didn't like Uchiha Sasuke, he had to admit that Uchiha Sasuke's strength was almost invincible after defeating Otsutsuki Kagaya. How troublesome. Looking at the indifferent Uchiha Sasuke, Dustless smiled faintly and his left and right eyes turned sharply at the same time. His left eye turned into a scarlet Mangekyo, and his right eye turned into a blue Tensigen. A great battle was about to break out. With the eruption of Dustless's chakra, Linger, who transformed into Uchiha Sasuke, wasn't afraid at all. A similarly terrifying and majestic chakra burst out. It wasn't inferior to Dustless's, and because of the gift from Hagoromo Otsutsuki, the amount of chakra was more than Dustless's. Ka. The competition of the two men's momentum blew the flowing air away, forming a large vacuum area, especially in the area with Wuchen and Uchiha Sasuke as the center. Almost everything was completely crushed and annihilated. Poochie. The sound of cloth tearing sounded, and the sharp-eyed people could see that there were some slight cracks in the corner of Wuchen's clothes. Of course, Uchiha Sasuke was the same, and some of his clothes burst open and fell to the ground. This guy is quite capable. Looking at the snow-like white clothes falling on the ground, Dustless was slightly stunned and his eyes were full of surprise. When he was about to look up, a black shadow suddenly covered him. Looking up, it was Uchiha Sasuke with a cold face and a shiny katana. Whoosh! A cold light flashed through the void and the sharp katana rushed down, trying to split Dustless's body into two. So fast. No, that shouldn't be speed, it should be some kind of jutsu. At the critical moment, Dustless quickly elementalized to get rid of the fatal blow, and immediately pulled a distance away from Uchiha Sasuke. Looking at the fragments on the ground, his brows slightly wrinkled and he quickly understood. This is the ability of his 6 Tomo Rinnegan. It seems to be called Heavenly Hand Power. It seems to be a space ninjutsu. Recalling the ability of Uchiha Sasuke's Rinnegan in his previous life, Dustless's heart quickly relaxed. This jutsu allows the caster and the target to exchange positions in a specific range in an instant, which can avoid the enemy's attack, and can also form an attack on the enemy by exchanging himself and other objects. Just now, Uchiha Sasuke and the fragments of his clothes were obviously exchanged. I really can't be careless. His heart sank slightly. Dustless's eyes were a little hazy and heavy. Uchiha Sasuke in the later stage is definitely one of the most powerful characters. Staring at Dustless, Uchiha Sasuke suddenly burst out. Bright red blood stains flowed out of his pupils, and immediately saw black flames burning Dustless's body, roasting Dustless's body. You want to burn me with a mere ghost fire? Naive. Looking at the black flames burning on his body, Dustless suddenly sneered, the Tensigen in his right eye twisted sharply, and his body instantly became like a black hole in the depths of the universe, swallowing Amaterasu in an instant. As for Dustless, naturally he was intact. But it's really powerful. 6 Tomo Rinnegan. Looking at Ling transformed into Uchiha Sasuke, Dustless wasn't stingy with his praise. As for the Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, Dustless directly ignored it. For now it's the same with or without the Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, although it can help him increase a lot of strength, it doesn't have much effect. All in all, for Dustless who now has the Tensigen and Mangekyo Sharingan, it's like a chicken bone, tasteless to eat but a pity to throw it away. Even now, Dustless only has the Mangekyo Sharingan. After fusing with Hashirama's cells, it's not much different from the Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. You're not bad. Uchiha Sasuke saw that Dustless could easily resolve his two attacks, and was also surprised by Dustless's strength, but soon his face changed and he stared at Dustless and said coldly, "You are indeed strong, but compared to me you are still too far away." Hearing this, Dustless's mouth twitched fiercely, and the corners of his mouth lifted into a wry smile, thinking that this guy is really famous for pretending to be weak. Chapter 121. Uchiha Sasuke can be said to be blessed by the heavens. He should be glad that he has such a meticulous brother like Uchiha Itachi. Everything that Uchiha Sasuke has was obtained by stepping on Uchiha Itachi's corpse. Without Uchiha Itachi he might have become blind. Naturally, Uchiha Sasuke also inherited everything from Itachi, whether in genjutsu or other aspects. It's my turn to fight back. Dustless's eyes suddenly condensed cold light and his pupils enlarged. Ordinary ninjutsu is useless against Rinnegan. Ordinary S-class ninjutsu like Amaterasu is almost useless in front of Rinnegan, and it can be easily absorbed by Rinnegan. If you want to use it, you have to use the unexpected. Tensigan Chakra Mode. Dustless's body suddenly swept up the green chakra coat, and Dustless's body was wrapped tightly and many green prayer beads floated behind him. The feeling he gave off was like the difference between heaven and earth. This is, Ling transformed into Uchiha Sasuke and looked at Dustless, who was wrapped in green chakra. Naturally, he has never seen the legendary Tensigan, especially the green eyes floating behind Dustless, which made him feel quite familiar. Those strange beads floating around seem similar to the truth-seeking ball. Although Uchiha Sasuke is arrogant and unruly, he is also a careful and calm person. Under the 6 Tomo Rinnegan state, he naturally knows that the green prayer beads are the power of yin and yang. In other words, it's actually another form of the power of 6 paths. This eye is called Tensigan, and it's the eye of the descendant of Otsutsuki Himura, the younger brother of Rikudo Sannin. The conditions for the birth of this eye are also extremely harsh. Tensigan is the same as Rinnegan. Pointing to the Tensigan in his right eye, Dustless smiled slightly, and deliberately explained it to his future third brother. Tensigan? Hearing this, Uchiha Sasuke frowned slightly. He really didn't know what Tensigan was and he has never seen it, but Otsutsuki Himura is the younger brother of Rikudo Sannin, and his eyes are on the same level as Rinnegan. I'll show you now. After saying that, Dustless suddenly waved his hand, and the green prayer beads behind him suddenly gathered in front of him, forming a small disc that was faintly filled with a strong storm. Silver Wheel Reincarnation Explosion. Dustless shot out a giant whirlwind from his hand. The raging whirlwind absorbed everything in its path and devoured it to perfect itself, constantly expanding its size. When it got close to Uchiha Sasuke, it was a behemoth hundreds of meters long, and the area affected was almost several miles. What terrifying power! Linger's Uchiha Sasuke's eyes flashed with surprise as he stared at the 100-meter-long bijou. He felt the power of the bijou and the hurricane that wanted to tear him into pieces. His surprise quickly turned into a dignified and resolute expression. The evil Chakra's body instantly soared several dozen feet into the air. The huge body covered the sky, the purple giant's head reached the sky, and its feet stepped on the ground. It was mighty and unyielding, with wings on its back, holding 2 long swords in its hands, and wearing the terrible Tengu armor. It was extremely visually shocking. It was Uchiha Sasuke's ultimate body, Kinsusanoo. Bang bang bang. Kinsusanoo's feet moved and the ground suddenly began to shake, interpreting the power and destruction to the limit. Every time Kinsusanoo took a step, the ground trembled with it. Even the air showed an unprecedented state of restraint due to the decadent and ancient temperament of Kinsusanoo. The sky was so small and the earth was so unbearable. It's useless. With a disdainful smile, Uchiha Sasuke looked at the oncoming giant whirlwind, and his face was full of endless sarcasm, and immediately controlled the ultimate body, Kinsusanoo's huge body. The 2 ancient swords in his hands were raised high and mercilessly roared down. Boom! The huge purple slash suddenly blasted out, erasing everything that came into contact with it along the way, and the ground was instantly pulled into a long and thick crack, and it went straight toward the whirlwind. Puchi! The sharp air wave directly scattered the 100-meter-long whirlwind, and the purple light easily penetrated it, and the air wave swept toward Dustless. The situation was rapidly deteriorating and Dustless was going to die here. I underestimated you, kid. Murderous aura surged between his eyebrows. Wu Chen's eyes shot out a monstrous killing intent. His body turned into thousands of rays of light, illuminating everything in the world. He used the glint fruit to directly ignore the attack of Uchiha Sasuke's ultimate body, Kinsisanu. What a tricky ability. Seeing that Dustless easily ignored Kinsisunu's attack, Uchiha Sasuke raised his eyebrows slightly, and then looked at Dustless, who turned into a rainbow light and swept straight toward the sky. Uchiha Sasuke, who was in the ultimate body, Kinsisanu, was extremely calm, holding his hands in front of him, calm and collected. There was a sense of loneliness at the top. As expected of a master of disguise, I really can't compare with him. Dustless in the sky naturally saw the change in Uchiha Sasuke's demeanor, and the corners of his mouth also raised uncontrollably with a playful smile, thinking that Uchiha Sasuke deserved to be the second protagonist. Dustless can only look up to this fearless spirit. Idiot, you think the ultimate body Kinsisanu is invincible? Ridiculous. Looking contemptuously at Kinsisanu's extraordinary body, Dustless shook his head helplessly. The ultimate body Kinsisanu can scare ordinary people such as the late-stage 5 Kage, but for Dustless, it's just a giant target. In other words, Uchiha Sasuke is an absolute target in a giant coffin. Chakra burst out of his body and a huge aura of life overflowed from his body. Dustless crossed his arms, and the palms of his hands shone with a dazzling golden light, covering a vast and infinite range. His pupils suddenly opened and a murderous aura roared out. Senjutsu, Yasakani no Magatama. Chapter 122. Light bullets rained down from the sky, unscrupulously roaring in the sky. The dense number of light bullets couldn't be captured at all, like a rainstorm changing the entire sky. The sky was dyed in a gorgeous golden color. Looking up, one could only see the endless flashes pouring down. In this case, it's difficult to find a place to not be covered, let alone escape unscathed. Good. Dense number. Looking up at the sky, Ling transformed into Uchiha Sasuke, after being sluggish for a long time, smacked his lips and muttered in disbelief, secretly smacking his lips. Looking at the dense number of raindrops, Susanu's huge body has indeed become the most suitable target. But even so, Uchiha Sasuke couldn't withdraw Kinsisanu, he could only rely on it to resist. Otherwise, the person who will be beaten into a sieve and be miserably dismembered may be himself. In such an environment, the ultimate body Kinsisanu can only resist. Uchiha Sasuke was not a fool, he immediately blocked Kinsisanu's arms in front of him, especially Kinsisanu's forehead. After all, he was in this position. Bang bang bang. Kinsisanu, bathed in the golden light bullets, became the target of devastation. The heavy armor on his body was constantly peeled off layer by layer, and his huge body was forcibly pushed back by the terrifying force. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Although Kinsisanu withstood a lot of light bullets because the coverage of the light group was too large, it was inevitable that some would leak and the ground became the target of slaughter. Looking around, there were countless holes in the ground the size of a fist, like a bee's nest. There were holes everywhere and they were connected to each other, showing how thoroughly destroyed it was. Damn it, hold on for me. Seeing Kinsisanu's outer armor, even his skin and the meridians in his body were quickly peeled off layer by layer. Uchiha Sasuke's eyes flashed with unprecedented madness, and the evil purple chakra on his body rose again, constantly recasting and consolidating, repairing Kinsisanu's body, trying to delay the destruction of the golden light. In this way he would be safe and sound. This kid is pretty good. Kinsisanu's damaged body was constantly repaired, resisting the erosion of the golden light. As time passed, the golden light bullets were no longer as dense as before, and the biting cold offensive gradually weakened, until now it completely stopped. Kinsisanu's body was destroyed many times during this period, but Uchiha Sasuke used the terrifying chakra to restore it. What a monster. That kind of chakra consumption, I'm afraid I can't use it that many times. Suddenly recalling Kinsisanu's body that was constantly destroyed and repaired, Dustless was speechless. He was worthy of being the one who received the gift of the 6 paths, and also the reincarnation of Indra. He was far superior in all aspects. If this is your unique skill, I'm sorry to tell you. Then today you will die. In the restored Kinsisanu, Uchiha Sasuke coldly looked at Dustless, and the murderous intent in his eyes shot straight at Dustless like a blade. With your level. You talk big, but I'm afraid you don't have the teeth to do it. Are all the children of the concubines so arrogant nowadays? Turning a deaf ear to Uchiha Sasuke's words, Dustless looked at Uchiha Sasuke faintly, and then with a provocative face he pointed his finger at him, signaling Uchiha Sasuke to come at him. Reckless thing, since you want to die so much, I'll help you. Seeing this, Uchiha Sasuke's face suddenly condensed into ice, and his murderous intent was revealed. Kinsisanu's body suddenly shook, and immediately, countless black runes poured into Kinsisanu's body, densely packed like ants, almost covering Kinsisanu's entire body. Glancing proudly at Dustless, Uchiha Sasuke suddenly shouted, and the cold tone made the temperature drop a lot, full of endless oppression. Senjutsu, Kinsisanu. Oh. As if it was given life, a ferocious roar came out of Kinsisanu's mouth, and the roar spread like a shock wave, and the ripples could be clearly seen in the endless void. As expected, the system's ability is truly heaven-defying and terrifying. This damned sparring, heavily exhaling a mouthful of turbid air, Wu Chen's eyes then heavily looked at Susanoo, which was covered with black veins all over its body, and the terrible thought in his heart was absolutely confirmed. As everyone knows, Uchiha Sasuke can't use the Senjutsu chakra at all, and the later Senjutsu, Kinsisanu, is the Senjutsu Kekkei Genkai after absorbing Yugo's chakra. Uchiha Sasuke himself didn't have this ability, but now he can use this jutsu, which means that all the characters in the system have retained their greatest strength when they were alive. Even if it's not their unique moves, even if it's a combination of moves, now it can be used without limit. In other words, even if Uchiha Sasuke summons the QB that doesn't belong to him now, he can also use it on Kinsisanu. Damn system. Dustless could only fiercely curse in his heart. This undoubtedly means that Uchiha Sasuke can now use 6 paths, Chibaku Tensei, and Indra's arrow, alone. Whether it's a combination or not, as long as Uchiha Sasuke has used ninjutsu before, he can use it now. Bastard, what a blunder. Dustless's face was pale and his whole body was cold. If it's really as he thought, maybe the one who will be crushed will be himself. I can only give it a try. The hesitation in his eyes was quickly replaced by madness. Dustless obviously intended to fight Uchiha Sasuke to the death, and his whole body was full of spirit. Chapter 123. Thinking quickly, Dustless's eyes flashed with a strange light. Thinking about it carefully, it's not like he has no chance of winning. Compared to Sasuke, who knows everything about his abilities, Kinsisanu doesn't know anything about his abilities, so he can have an unexpected effect. Uchiha Sasuke, you will be the first person to see me use the Tensigen with all my strength. The green light that wrapped Dustless's whole body became stronger, even stronger than Otsutsuki Hagoromo on the moon. Pretentious, I'll tear off your clothes now. Ling transformed into Uchiha Sasuke and smiled contemptuously. Ultimate Susanoo suddenly flashed a purple bow, and at the same time he pulled the bow with all his strength, and an extremely sharp arrow whizzed towards his face. Idiot! Raising his eyelids, his eyes were calm, indifferent and calm, without any emotional fluctuations, and the world in his pupils was like stagnant water without vitality. Looking up, he saw Dustless indifferently raising his tender and slender right arm, and the palm of his right hand emitted a brilliant golden light, and immediately slashed forward. Golden Wheel Reincarnation Explosion. The golden light in Dustless's palm stretched for hundreds of meters in an instant, and Kinsisanu's arrow was broken, and the straight light stretched without limit, sweeping toward Madara and Kinsisanu. Pucci! This epic scene was unforgettable. The golden ray of light swept across, and the moment it came into contact with the Senjutsu, Susanoo, it directly penetrated it and the golden light passed through its body. Faintly one could see that Kinsisanu's neck was casually cut, and the incision was dotted with golden light, and it didn't dissipate for a long time, as if it was permanently imprinted on it and it couldn't be erased. Gotcha! Kinsisanu's huge body and head were directly cut in two. It's a pity that the distance is too far and I can't completely control it. Otherwise that kid would have been directly crushed like Kinsisanu. helplessly shaking his head. Dustless sighed with disappointment, and his eyes were full of pity. Maybe if he moved a little more, Kinsusanu's body would have been cut. Compared to Dustless, who was full of disappointment, Uchiha Sasuke was stunned, and he turned his head and stared at Dustless in horror. He never felt that death was so close to him. Damn kid, don't show off. Seeing that Uchiha Sasuke was still in shock with cold sweat on his forehead, and even the hair on his temples was sweaty, Dustless suddenly felt happy and his face was flushed and he was full of energy. According to Dustless's personal guess, Tenseigan is more inclined to attack, such as powerful moves like Golden Wheel Reincarnation Explosion, while Rinnegan is more inclined to seal, such as super powerful seals like Chibaku Tensei. Of course, Rinnegan still varies according to the individual's ability. In addition, Otsutsuki Kagaya's 9-tomo Rinnegan, which is the legendary Rinnegan Sharingan, is also a special case. In short, there is nothing absolute in the world. One thing is certain, Tenseigan and Rinnegan have their own strengths and weaknesses, and they work together perfectly. It's really the perfect combination, and it also makes him more determined to defeat Uchiha Sasuke, take everything from him and open his own Rinnegan. That move just now must be the so-called Tenseigan Jutsu. It's really not an ordinary eye. Staring at Dustless's right eye, Uchiha Sasuke thought calmly thinking about countermeasures. There was only a single color in his eyes and only absolute reason. Let's test you with this move. The black energy ball formed by high-density chakra slowly flew from Uchiha Sasuke's hand to the sky. The dark ball's surface was covered with dark golden light, shrouded in unprecedented gravity, and the whole ground began to buzz and tremble. The ground trembled like the organs in the human body and it began to squirm. Chibaku Tensei. Boom! In the endless void, the mysterious black ball was suddenly swallowed by the black ghost fire, and then violently exploded. A huge mushroom cloud swept across the distant sky, and the black smoke didn't dissipate for a long time. Bastard! Seeing this, Uchiha Sasuke roared angrily and his voice was like thunder. His painstaking plan was instantly seen through by Dustless. How could he not be angry? You're angry over such a trivial matter. Looking at Uchiha Sasuke, Dustless immediately smiled and said, "Or are you saying that you have exhausted your talents? This is the best. I can also save some effort. After all, this is the same as the real world. If I get injured, I will also get injured in the real world. You're dreaming." Glancing at Dustless, Uchiha Sasuke sneered again, and a cold demonic smile appeared on his face. 1, 2, or even 3 Chibaku Tensei, you may be able to destroy them, but if this number is doubled and it becomes 9, I'll see what you can do. At the end of his words, Uchiha Sasuke's expression suddenly changed, and his 6-tomo Rinne eyes flashed with a thick murderous aura. His whole body was like a flood dam and chakra was erupting freely. Chibaku Tensei. Boom. Boom. 9 black balls floated to the sky and 6 black flames rose in the void. Although Dustless destroyed 6 balls in the first place, there were still 3 Chibaku Tensei that successfully avoided Dustless's attack. Kakaka. The 3 high-density black chakra balls suddenly erupted with a strong gravitational force, and the solid ground suddenly collapsed like a piece of paper, exposing the soil in the depths of the ground to the light of the eyes. As far as the eye could see, countless giant mountains were rushing toward the 3 black spheres in the sky, completely ignoring gravity. Chapter 124. As the most powerful seal of Rinnegan, Chibaku Tensei's power is beyond doubt, and Uchiha Sasuke, who has 6-tomo Rinnegan, is able to exert the power of Chibaku Tensei to the fullest. In the blink of an eye, the world will collapse, the sun and the moon will become colorless, playing the meaning of the word destruction to the limit. The powerful eye power is far stronger than Uzumaki Nagato. Uchiha Sasuke can launch 9 Chibaku Tensei at once and he's still strong. If it's Uzumaki Nagato, maybe he will die because of chakra. Where does this guy get his confidence? Following Uchiha Sasuke's gaze, he saw that Dustless's body was also attracted by the gravitational force of Chibaku Tensei, and his body began to slowly float up. However, what puzzled Uchiha Sasuke was that Dustless looked calm. Seeing that he was about to be swallowed by Chibaku Tensei, he didn't show the slightest fear. His temperament was steady and calm, which made Uchiha Sasuke frown slightly. Pretentious. After thinking for a while, Uchiha Sasuke's eyes condensed cold light, and then he just snorted, and then looked at Dustless with a cold expression and chose to be silent. He looked at Dustless with an indifferent expression. I want to see what means you have to face the attack of 3 Chibaku Tensei and swim safely. Staring at Dustless, Uchiha Sasuke's eyes were in a trance, and then he quickly recovered his calmness, whispering to himself. Wu Chen's expression was rather calm. There was even a faint smile on his face, giving people the feeling of being bathed in the spring breeze. Especially the gentle and pleasant smile at the corners of his mouth. It was completely opposite to his usual murderous and cold style. It's worthy of the jutsu that can seal Otsutsuki Kagaya later. Looking up slightly, looking at the black beads above his head full of endless gravity, Dustless couldn't help but sigh. Although this can't be compared to the scale of Rakudo Chibaku Tensei, the gravitational force on it is enough to easily overturn everything. As far as the eye could see, the horizon had changed. But this kind of thing can't get rid of me. Staring at the terrifying black sphere, Dustless's lips curled into a cold smile. The materialized evil chakra gushed out and covered Dustless's body. Kensusanoo, holding the katana of light, suddenly appeared and covered Dustless's body. The materialized giant was wearing the Tengu armor. Even though it wasn't as huge as Sasuke's ultimate body, in terms of momentum, it wasn't weaker than Sasuke's ultimate body. Explode. As Dustless's voice fell, Kensusanoo's katana of light slashed towards the Chibaku Tensei. The entire horizon suddenly trembled and a blazing wave of fire burst out, and an incomparably hot wave of air swept out like a wave. Is that his Kensusanoo? How is that possible? How can a mature Kensusanoo be so big? Seeing that the Chibaku Tensei was destroyed by Dustless's Kensusanoo transformed into Uchiha Sasuke didn't care much. He also thought that this trick couldn't get rid of Dustless. But what surprised him was that the mature Kensusanoo's physique was really scary. It was just a little shorter than his ultimate body Kensusanoo. There are still 2 left. Staring at the remaining 2 Chibaku Tensei still filled with irresistible gravity, Dustless in Kensusanoo raised his eyebrows slightly, and then his body rushed forward. The katana of light was ready to be used and swept out. Boom! 2 golden airwaves suddenly shot out from the long blade. The sharp whistling sound made people's ears hurt. The golden luster cut through the thistles and thorns like the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves. It easily destroyed the 2 Chibaku heavenly stars. At a glance, there were only 3 blazing fires in the blue sky. It seems that your Rinnegan is just as Looking at Uchiha Sasuke's face, Dustless chuckled leisurely and his Tensigan rippled faintly and said faintly, Rinnegan is just I hope I can still be so leisurely and calm after this. Suppressing the burning anger in his heart, Uchiha Sasuke could be said to be burning with anger. Even if he hid it well, anyone could see his anger, and immediately said to Dustless in a cold voice. If you want to destroy him, first make him crazy. Seeing this, Dustless laughed in his heart. Uchiha Sasuke's temper is quite impulsive, and now he saw that the strongest seal of Rinnegan was easily broken by him. For the extremely arrogant and conceited Uchiha Sasuke, Dustless's move has completely angered him, and now it's completely adding fuel to the fire. The characters in the system are almost exactly the same as in the real world, whether it's personality or strength, there is no change. This kid's eye of reincarnation is really strong. Although Dustless showed that Uchiha Sasuke was extremely disdainful, he had to admit that Uchiha Sasuke's 6-Tomo Rinnegan is indeed great, and he can launch 9 consecutive Chibaku Tensei in the state of one eye at the same time. Whoosh! The sound of the air breaking sounded, and the blazing fire could be felt from far away. Looking up, the scene reflected in his eyes was a black arrow whistling through the air, flashing with a dark light, revealing a blazing fire that could devour everything, and its power was very powerful. This is the ability of his eternal Mangekyo. It seems that he can control Amaterasu's mentality, and turn Amaterasu into any form according to his will. Frowning slightly, Wuxia stared at the black arrow flying towards him. He was not afraid at all. He gently raised his right arm, opened his 5 fingers, and shot out a repulsive force towards Amaterasu's black arrow. Boom! The black arrow formed by Amaterasu suddenly burst and fell to the ground like raindrops, not to mention hurting Dustless. It was extremely difficult to get close to him. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.